My son handed his father-in-law a gold-embossed envelope containing a first-class trip to Dubai worth $55,000. The entire restaurant erupted in applause. Then he turned to me, his own flesh and blood, the man who broke his back on the Chicago docks for 40 years to put him through college, and tossed a crumpled piece of paper onto the white tablecloth. "Happy Father's Day, Pops," he sneered, refusing to look me in the eye. It was a Powerball lottery ticket. Cost $2.50. "Don't spend it all in one place," my daughter-in-law laughed, sipping her vintage champagne. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I just took the ticket. What they didn't know was that 7 days later, that crumpled piece of paper would be worth $148 million. And when my son called me 109 times begging for a dime to save his fake empire, I didn't answer. Before I tell you how I destroyed their lives with a single signature, hit that like button and subscribe if you believe respect is earned, not bought. Now let me take you back to the dinner that started the war. I stood outside the Gilded Cage, a 5-star restaurant in downtown Chicago where a glass of water costs more than a loaf of bread. I smoothed down the lapels of my navy blue suit. It was the best one I owned, bought in 1998 for my wife Beatrice's funeral. It smelled faintly of mothballs and cedar, a scent that comforted me but apparently offended the valet. He looked at my worn-out dress shoes, the leather cracked from years of walking to save bus fare, and asked if I was making a delivery. I told him I was a guest. He scoffed, pointing me toward the side entrance as if I were the help. I ignored him and walked through the main revolving doors head high. I am Booker Coleman. I spent 4 decades hauling crates in the freezing wind so my son Jamal could have soft hands and a college degree. I had nothing to be ashamed of. Inside, the air smelled of truffles and expensive perfume. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen tears from the ceiling. I spotted them immediately. A long table near the window, the prime spot. Jamal was there wearing a tailored Italian suit that cost more than my car. Next to him was Tiffany, his wife, a woman who looked at me the way one looks at a stain on a silk rug. And across from them sat Preston and Caroline, Tiffany's parents. Preston was wearing a Rolex the size of a hockey puck, laughing loudly at something Jamal said. They looked like a picture from a magazine I couldn't afford to buy. I approached the table. Jamal saw me first. His smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of panic. He stood up not to hug me, but to block me. "Hey, Pops, you made it," he said, his voice tight. He scanned the room, checking if any of his important business associates were watching. "You're wearing the blue suit again. Didn't I send you money for a new one last Christmas?" "You did," I replied calmly. "I used it to pay the property tax on the house so I wouldn't get evicted." Jamal rolled his eyes. "Whatever. Just try not to draw attention to yourself. We have VIPs at the next table." He guided me to the table, but not to the empty seat next to him. That seat was reserved for his briefcase. He pointed to a chair at the far end, tucked partially behind a decorative pillar. It was the spot where you put the embarrassing relative. "Hello," Booker Preston boomed, his face flushed with expensive wine. "Still living in that little shack on the south side, you really should sell. Gentrification is coming. You could make a few bucks and move into a facility." A facility. That's what they called a nursing home. I sat down. "Hello, Preston." "The house is fine. It has memories." "Memories don't pay the bills, old man," Tiffany chimed in, not even looking up from her phone. The waiter arrived. He poured wine for everyone, but skipped my glass. I didn't ask for any. I just wanted water. Jamal ordered for the table. Wagyu beef, lobster, thermidor, caviar. When he got to me, he didn't even ask what I wanted. "Bring him the chicken breast plain," Jamal told the waiter. His stomach can't handle rich food. My stomach could handle iron nails. But I said nothing. I sat there in silence, listening to them talk about their summer homes, their new Teslas, and the investments Preston was making. Jamal nodded along like a bobblehead, agreeing with everything Preston said. I knew the truth, though. I knew Jamal was drowning in debt. I had seen the late notices in his mail when I visited last month. But here tonight he was playing the part of the successful tycoon. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. The gifts. It was Father's Day after all. Jamal stood up and tapped his spoon against his wine glass. The table went quiet. "I want to make a toast," he began, flashing his salesman's smile, "to the men who shaped us, to the leaders, to the fathers." He turned his back to me and faced Preston. "Preston, you have been more than a father-in-law to me. You've been a mentor, a guide. You taught me that success is a mindset. Preston beamed, puffing out his chest. Jamal reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick, gold-embossed envelope. He handed it to Preston with two hands like an offering to a god. Preston tore it open. His eyes went wide. He pulled out 2 tickets. First class, Emirates, Dubai, 5-star hotel included. A customized itinerary for 2 weeks. "Oh my God," Caroline shrieked. "Jamal, this is too much." Preston stood up and bear-hugged my son. "My boy, now this is class. This is a $55,000 gift you really shouldn't have, but I'm glad you did." The entire restaurant turned to look. People at other tables clapped. The waiter nodded in approval. Jamal soaked it in, looking like he had just won the Super Bowl. Tiffany kissed him on the cheek. "You're such a generous provider, baby," she cooed loud enough for the next table to hear. I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, looking at the chicken breast that had gone cold. $55,000. That was more than I made in 2 years on the docks. That was the money I gave him for his down payment on his first condo money he swore he'd pay back, but never did. Then the applause died down. Jamal sat back down, adjusting his cuffs. He took a sip of wine, then glanced at me as if he had just remembered I was there. "Oh, right," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Pops." He didn't stand up this time. He didn't make a speech. He didn't call me a mentor. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small, flimsy piece of paper. He slid it across the tablecloth. It stopped right next to the butter dish. "Happy Father's Day," he said casually. "I stopped for gas on the way here and thought of you. You always liked gambling, right?" I picked up the paper. It was a quick pick Powerball ticket for tonight's drawing. Price $2.50. That was it. No card, no envelope, just a piece of thermal paper that would fade in the sun. Tiffany giggled a sharp, cruel sound. "Don't lose it, Booker. That's your retirement plan right there. Maybe if you win, you can finally buy a suit that doesn't smell like mothballs." Preston chuckled, shaking his head. "Gambling is a tax on the poor, Jamal. You know that. But hey, let the old man dream." I looked at the ticket. I looked at the numbers. 0, 4, 12, 18, 26, 44. Powerball 10. Random numbers generated by a machine at a Texaco station. I looked at Jamal. I was waiting for the punchline. I was waiting for him to pull out the real gift, or at least a card written with some sincerity. But he had already turned back to Preston, discussing the best golf courses in Dubai. He had dismissed me. To him, I was just an obligation, a box to check so he could tell himself he was a good son. I felt a heat rising in my chest, not anger, but a profound, icy clarity. I realized then that the son I raised was dead. The boy who used to sit on my lap and listen to stories about the ships coming into the harbor was gone. In his place was this stranger, this hollow man who measured worth in dollars and cents. I slowly folded the lottery ticket and placed it in the breast pocket of my old suit right over my heart. I didn't eat the chicken. I placed my napkin on the table. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, a loud, jarring sound that made Tiffany wince. "Where are you going?" Jamal asked, annoyed. "We haven't had dessert yet," Preston ordered the souffle. "I'm going home," I said. My voice was steady, low. It didn't tremble. "Thank you for the gift, son. I hope the Dubai trip brings you exactly what you deserve." Jamal frowned. "You're walking. It's raining outside. Do you want me to call you an Uber? I don't have the app on my phone." "No," I said. "I'll walk. It keeps the blood moving." I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I could feel their eyes on my back. I could hear Tiffany whispering, "See, so ungrateful. He ruins every dinner." I walked past the host stand, past the valet who looked through me, and out into the Chicago night. It was raining, a cold, steady drizzle that soaked through my thin suit in minutes. I didn't care. I started walking south. It was 5 miles to my neighborhood, 5 miles from the glitz of the Gold Coast to the cracked sidewalks of the South Side. Cars splashed water on me as they sped past. People looked at the old black man in the wetsuit walking alone and crossed the street to avoid me. But as I walked, I wasn't cold. I was burning. I touched the ticket in my pocket. $2.50. That was the value my son placed on me, the price of a gallon of milk in 1990. I kept walking, putting one foot in front of the other, the rhythm of my steps matching the beating of my heart. I didn't know it then, but I was walking away from my old life. I was walking toward a destiny that none of us could have predicted. I finally reached my small house on 73rd Street. Ideally, I would have collapsed into bed, but I couldn't sleep. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. It was 10:59 p.m. The drawing was in 1 minute. I sat on the edge of my worn-out recliner and turned on the small television set that sat on a milk crate. The news anchor was smiling, announcing the winning numbers for the largest jackpot of the year, $148 million. The balls dropped. 4, 12, 18, 26, 44, and the red Powerball, 10. I sat there in the dark, the blue light of the TV flickering on my face. I reached into my damp pocket and pulled out the crumpled ticket. I smoothed it out on my knee. I read the numbers. Then I read them again. And again. I didn't scream. I didn't jump up and down. I sat in absolute silence, listening to the rain hit the roof. The silence wasn't empty. It was heavy. It was the sound of the universe shifting its weight. My son had given me a joke. He had given me a piece of trash to mock my poverty, and in doing so, he had handed me the keys to the kingdom. I looked at the phone on the side table. I knew that in a few days Jamal would come calling. Not to apologize, but to take. He would come for the house. He would come to put me in a home. He didn't know about the ticket. Nobody did. And that was exactly how I was going to keep it. I turned off the TV. I sat in the dark holding the ticket. The war had begun. And for the first time in my life, I had the nuclear option. The rain hadn't stopped. It drummed against the aluminum siding of my small house on 73rd Street, a rhythmic, lonely sound that had been the soundtrack to my life since Beatrice passed 5 years ago. I sat in the dark, the only light coming from the flickering blue screen of the old television set perched on a milk crate. My suit was still damp, smelling of the rain and the humiliation of the evening. I hadn't taken it off. I felt like if I took it off, I would be admitting that the dinner had actually happened, that my son had actually looked at me with that much disdain. The clock on the wall read 10:59. My hand went to my breast pocket almost against my will. I pulled out the slip of thermal paper. It was flimsy, cheap, already curling at the edges. A $2.50 joke. Jamal had laughed when he gave it to me. Tiffany had sneered. They thought they were handing me a piece of trash, a symbol of how little I was worth to them. I smoothed it out onto the arm of my recliner, the fabric worn thin by years of exhausted evenings. On the screen, the news anchor flashed a smile that was too bright for a Tuesday night. She announced the jackpot. $148 million. A number so large it didn't even feel real. It felt like a distance to the moon. The machine began to mix the balls. I looked down at the ticket. I hadn't even looked at the numbers in the restaurant. I looked now. The first ball dropped. 4. My breath hitched. April 4th. Beatrice's birthday. I traced the number on the paper with my callous thumb. The second ball. 12. December. The month Jamal graduated from college. I remembered sitting in the nosebleed seats of the auditorium, my hands cracked and bleeding from a double shift at the docks, tears streaming down my face as I watched him walk across that stage. I had felt like a king that day because my son was going to be better than me. The third ball, 18. The day I finally retired, the day I walked away from the shipping crates and the back-breaking labor, thinking I would spend my twilight years resting with my family. The fourth ball, 26. The age I was when I bought this house. The house Jamal called a shack. The house where we measured his height on the doorframe of the kitchen pantry. The fifth ball, 44. The year I was born. And finally, the red Powerball. 10. My shift number. For 40 years, I was number 10 on the roster. I sat there in the silence. The anchor was reading the numbers again, her voice excited, vibrating with the energy of changing someone's life. But in my living room, the air was heavy. Still. I looked at the ticket. I looked at the screen. They matched. Every single one. I didn't scream. I didn't jump up and dance. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the true weight of my life pressing down on me. $148 million. I closed my eyes and the memories came flooding back, not as happy nostalgia, but as a ledger of debts paid and unappreciated. I saw myself at 30, standing in the freezing Chicago wind off Lake Michigan, my fingers numb loading crates until my spine felt like it was going to snap. I did it for the overtime. I did it so Jamal could have braces. I saw myself at 40 eating cold sandwiches in the cab of a truck so I could save $5 a day to put into his college fund. I saw myself at 50 wearing shoes with holes in the soles so Jamal could have the newest Jordans so he wouldn't feel less than the other kids. I had broken my body for him. I had hollowed myself out to fill him up. And tonight he had looked at me across a table covered in white linen and treated me like a beggar. He had thrown this ticket at me like a scrap of meat to a stray dog. He gave his father-in-law a $55,000 vacation. He gave me a piece of paper he bought at a gas station. I opened my eyes. The blue light of the TV reflected off the ticket. It wasn't a joke anymore. It was a weapon. God or the universe or the spirit of Beatrice had turned his insult into an arsenal. I folded the ticket carefully, placing it back in my breast pocket right over my heart. I turned off the TV. The darkness was absolute. I sat there until the sun began to turn the gray sky a lighter shade of gray. I didn't sleep. I plotted. At 8 in the morning, I stood up. My joints popped, a reminder of the years of labor. I made a pot of coffee, drank it black, and walked out the door. I didn't go to the lottery headquarters. I didn't go to the car dealership. I walked 3 miles to a small, dusty office above a bakery in a neighborhood that gentrification hadn't found yet. Denzel Washington, no relation, he always joked, was sitting behind a desk buried under stacks of paper. He was 72, a lawyer who had spent his life fighting eviction notices and petty drug charges for kids who didn't deserve prison. He was the only man I trusted. Booker Denzel looked up, adjusting his thick glasses. "You look like you walked through a ghost." I sat down in the chair opposite him. It creaked. I reached into my pocket and placed the ticket on his desk. "I need you to look at this, Denzel." He picked it up. He looked at me confused. Then he pulled up the numbers on his ancient computer. He stopped. He took off his glasses. He cleaned them. He put them back on. He looked at the screen, then at the ticket, then at me. "Booker," he whispered. "Is this real?" "It's real," I said. 148 million, Denzel said, the words heavy in his mouth. "You won the Powerball. Why aren't you smiling? Why aren't you popping champagne?" "Because my son gave it to me," I said. I told Denzel everything. The dinner, the disrespect, the Dubai trip, the way Tiffany looked at me, the way Jamal treated me. Denzel listened, his face hardening. He knew Jamal. He had known him since he was a boy in short pants. He knew what I had sacrificed. "So what do you want to do?" Denzel asked. "Do you want to claim it? Do you want to give him half?" I looked at the dust motes dancing in the shaft of sunlight coming through the window. "I want to claim it," I said. "But not yet. And not in my name, not publicly. I want a blind trust, Denzel. I want an LLC. I want it locked down so tight that even God himself would need a password to see who owns it. And I want you to be the face of it." Denzel nodded slowly. "We can do that. It will take a few days to set up the structure. We call it a silence plan. Nobody knows but us." "Good," I said, "because I have a feeling Jamal is going to come calling soon, and I need to know exactly who he is when he thinks I have nothing." I left the ticket with Denzel. He locked it in a safe that looked like it had survived both world wars. I walked out of his office feeling lighter but also colder. I had just handed over a fortune, but I felt like I was preparing for a funeral. I walked back to my house. The rain had started again. I let myself in and sat back down in the recliner. I waited. I knew my son. I knew his greed. I knew his desperation. 2 hours later, the phone rang. It was Jamal. I picked up. "Hello?" There was no greeting. No, "How are you, Pops?" No apology for the dinner. "Pops, are you home?" His voice was brisk, businesslike. "I am," I said. "Good. Listen, I need you to start packing." I gripped the phone. "Packing what for?" "I sold the house." "Pops," the air left the room. "The house, my house, the house I paid for with 40 years of sweat. Whatever you think you own, you don't," Jamal said, his voice impatient. "The deed was transferred to my name 5 years ago when you had that pneumonia scare, remember? You signed the power of attorney. You said you trusted me to handle your affairs." I remembered. I had been weak, feverish. He had brought papers. He said it was to help pay the medical bills. I trusted him. He was my son. "I found a buyer," Jamal continued, speaking fast, like a man trying to outrun his own conscience. "They're tearing it down to build condos. They're paying cash, $150,000. The closing is in 3 days. "Where am I supposed to go, Jamal?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I made arrangements," he said. "There's a state facility on the west side, Shady Pines. It's affordable. They have a bed opening on Monday. It's for the best pops. You can't take care of this place anymore. It's an eyesore. An eyesore. That's what he called the home where his mother died. And the money I asked. The 150,000. That's for me, Pops, he snapped. Consider it reimbursement for all the years I had to deal with your situation, for the burden. Besides, I need it. Tiffany and I are closing on the penthouse. We need the cash for the final deposit. He was evicting me. He was throwing me into a state-run nursing home, a warehouse for the forgotten, so he could buy a penthouse. I held the phone away from my ear. I looked at it. I thought about the safe in Denzel's office. I thought about the $148 million. I could have told him right then. I could have screamed it into the phone. I could have told him I could buy his penthouse and burn it down just for the heat. But I didn't. I brought the phone back to my ear. Okay, son, I said. Okay. He sounded surprised. Just like that, I said. You do what you have to do. Good, he said, relieved. The movers will be there tomorrow. Don't pack any junk, just clothes. We don't want you bringing cockroaches to the facility. He hung up. I sat in the silence of my home, the home that was no longer mine. He thought he had won. He thought he had discarded me like an old rapper. He didn't know that he had just severed the last thread of loyalty I had left. He didn't know that he hadn't just evicted his father. He had evicted his only chance at salvation. I stood up and went to the closet. I started to pack, but I wasn't packing to leave. I was packing for war. The next morning, the sun hadn't even fully risen when the silence of my home was shattered. I was sitting in my armchair, the leather cracked and worn from years of use, drinking a cup of stale coffee. I heard the screech of tires on the pavement outside, followed by the slamming of car doors. Heavy footsteps pounded up the walkway. They didn't knock. They didn't ring the doorbell. The key turned in the lock with a violent twist, and the door swung open, hitting the wall with a thud that shook the picture frames. It was Jamal and Tiffany. They didn't come with breakfast. They didn't come with greetings. They came with cardboard boxes. Dozens of them flattened and tucked under their arms, looking like weapons of war. Jamal was wearing a tracksuit that probably cost more than my monthly pension, but his eyes were wild, darting around the room as if he expected the furniture to run away. Tiffany was right behind him, holding a clipboard and wearing a mask of disgust, wrinkling her nose as if the smell of old paper and memories was toxic fumes. Start in the kitchen, Jamal barked, not even looking at me. Throw out anything expired. Pack the pots if they aren't rusted. Everything else goes in the dumpster. I didn't move. I sat there, my hands wrapped around my mug, watching them invade my sanctuary. Jamal, I said, my voice calm, contrasting with the storm he brought inside. What is this? He spun around, looking at me as if I were a squatter he had just discovered. It's happening, Pops. Today. We don't have time to waste. He walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up a ceramic figurine, a small angel Beatrice had bought at a garage sale 20 years ago. He looked at it for a second, then tossed it into a trash bag he had pulled from his pocket. The house is sold, he said, moving to the next item. I closed the deal an hour ago. A developer. Cash offer. $150,000. They're going to bulldoze it next week. $150,000. The number hung in the air. That was the price of my life, the price of the walls that held 40 years of laughter and tears. To him, it was just a number on a check. I stood up slowly. My knees ached. Why, Jamal, I asked. Why the rush? He stopped packing and looked at me, his face twisted with a mixture of guilt and greed. Because I need the liquidity, Pops. The penthouse. The one downtown with the view of the lake. The seller accepted our offer, but they want a higher deposit by Friday. $150,000. This shack is exactly what I need to close the gap. He called my home a shack. He called the place where he took his first steps a shack. It's an investment, Tiffany chimed in, her voice shrill. She was standing by the window, not touching anything, just directing. We need to maintain our standards, Booker. We can't live in a rental forever. We have an image to uphold. And frankly, this place is embarrassing. It's rotting. The roof is leaking. It's a money pit. I looked at her. Then I looked at the walls. Yes, the paint was peeling. Yes, the roof leaked when the rain was hard. But it was paid for. It was mine. This is your mother's house, I said to Jamal. Her spirit is in these walls. You can't just sell it for a down payment on a condo. Jamal slammed a book onto the floor. She's dead, Pops. She's been dead for 5 years. Spirits don't pay mortgages. Spirits don't get you into the right social circles. You're living in the past. We are trying to build a future. Tiffany walked over to me. She stood too close, invading my personal space, smelling of expensive lotion and cruelty. "Look, old man," she said, her voice dropping to a hiss. "Don't be selfish. You've had your time. You're 75. What do you need a 3-bedroom house for? To rot in. We're doing you a favor." "A favor?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "We found you a place. Shady Pines. It's state-subsidized. We already signed the papers. You'll have a bed 3 meals a day and staff to watch you." She smirked, a cold, ugly expression that distorted her pretty face. "Honestly, Booker, isn't it better? You're incontinent, aren't you? Or you will be soon. At the facility, there's someone to change your diapers. You won't be a burden on us anymore." The words hit me like a physical blow. Change my diapers. Burden. That was all I was to them. A leaking pipe that needed to be plugged, a piece of furniture that had gone out of style. I felt a weight in my jacket pocket. The lottery ticket. The $148 million piece of paper. I had taken it back from Denzel this morning just for this moment. I needed to know. I needed to see how deep the rot went. I reached into my pocket with a trembling hand. I pulled out the ticket. Jamal saw it. He paused. "What's that?" he asked, squinting. "It's the gift you gave me," I said softly. "The lottery ticket." He laughed. A short barking sound. "You still have that? I thought you threw it away." "It's trash, Pops. A loser. Just like this house." I looked at the ticket. Then I looked at Tiffany. I let my fingers go loose. The ticket fluttered down from my hand, drifting through the air like a falling leaf. It landed on the linoleum floor right between Tiffany's designer boots. I held my breath. This was the test. If one of them picked it up, if one of them showed even a shred of respect for the gift they had given me, maybe there was hope. Maybe I would reconsider. Tiffany looked down at the paper. She looked at me. She didn't bend down. She didn't pick it up. She lifted her foot and kicked it. She kicked the ticket. She kicked $148 million across the kitchen floor. It slid under the gap of the old refrigerator, disappearing into the dust and the darkness underneath. "Trash," she muttered. "Stop littering, Booker. We're trying to clean this place up for the inspection." That was it. The final seal. The last nail in the coffin of my fatherhood. She had kicked away their salvation because she was too arrogant to bend down. She had called my fortune trash. I looked at the space under the fridge. I knew exactly where it was. It was safe there. Safer than in their hands. "Fine," I said. My voice was different now. It was hollowed out. There was no emotion left in it. Just the cold, hard steel of resolve. "Fine," what Jamal asked, taping up a box of my books. "I'll sign," I said. "I'll sell the house." Jamal stopped. He looked at me, surprised by my sudden surrender. "Really? You're not going to fight us?" "What's the point?" I asked, looking at the empty space on the mantel where the angel used to be. "You're right. I'm old. I'm tired. Maybe it is time to go." Jamal let out a long breath, his shoulders dropping. "Thank God, Pops. You're finally seeing reason. Where are the papers? I have them in the car. I'll get them." He ran out the door, eager as a child on Christmas morning. Tiffany stayed watching me with suspicion. She didn't trust my capitulation. She thought I was plotting something. She was right, of course, but she was looking for a small plot, a petty revenge. She couldn't comprehend the scale of what was actually happening. Jamal came back with a thick folder. He slammed it on the kitchen table, pushing aside my coffee mug. "Sign here, here, and here. It transfers the deed to the LLC I set up. The money goes straight to escrow for my penthouse." I picked up the pen. I looked at the papers. It was a standard quitclaim deed. I was giving him everything. For nothing. "I'll sign," I said, hovering the pen over the line. "But I have one condition." Jamal frowned. "What condition?" "We don't have money for handouts, Pops." "I don't want money," I said. "I want time. 1 week." "1 week," Tiffany snapped. "We don't have a week. The developers want possession in 3 days. I want 1 week to say goodbye to this house," I said firmly. "To say goodbye to the memories of your mother. I will stay here for 7 days. I will pack my own things. I will be ready to leave next Monday. If you don't agree, I don't sign. And you can explain to your penthouse seller why you don't have the deposit." Jamal looked at Tiffany. They exchanged a silent, frantic conversation. They were desperate. They needed that money. They knew that if I fought them in court, it would take months. They didn't have months. They didn't even have weeks. Fine, Jamal said through gritted teeth. 1 week. Next Monday morning the van comes for you, and you go straight to Shady Pines. No arguments. Agreed, I said. I signed the papers. My signature was steady. I wasn't signing away my home. I was signing their death warrant. I handed the papers to Jamal. He grabbed them, checking the signature, his eyes gleaming with victory. He thought he had won. He thought he had stripped me bare. There's one more thing, Tiffany said. She reached into her massive purse and pulled out 3 small white boxes. Nest cameras. What are those for? I asked. Insurance, she said, her voice cold. We're leaving these here. In the living room, the kitchen, and the hallway. We need to make sure you don't damage the property. We need to make sure you don't give away anything valuable to the neighbors. And honestly, Booker, we need to make sure you don't do something senile like leave the stove on and burn our investment to the ground. Jamal nodded. It's for your protection, Pops. We can monitor you from our phones. If you fall, we'll know. They were putting me under surveillance, in my own home. They wanted to watch me like a rat in a cage. They wanted to make sure I didn't steal my own possessions before they could sell them. Go ahead, I said. Put them up. Jamal spent the next hour installing the cameras. The blinking red lights stared at me from the corners of the room, the unblinking eyes of my captors. They tested the feed on their phones, laughing as they saw me sitting in my chair on their screens. Crystal clear, Jamal said. Now we can see everything. You sure can, son, I thought. You're going to see exactly what I want you to see. They left an hour later, taking the signed deed and the boxes they had already packed. They left me in a house that was no longer mine, watched by cameras that fed directly to their greed. I sat in the kitchen. I waited until I heard their car drive away. Then I looked at the refrigerator. I got down on my hands and knees, groaning as my old bones protested. I reached into the dark, dusty gap underneath. My fingers brushed against a piece of paper. I pulled it out. The ticket. I blew the dust off it. It was still perfect. $148 million. I looked up at the camera Jamal had installed in the corner of the ceiling. The red light blinked at me. I knew he wasn't watching right now. He was too busy celebrating. But soon, he would be watching. I smiled at the camera. A slow, cold smile. You want a show, son? I whispered. I'll give you a show. I put the ticket in my pocket. I had 7 days. 7 days to plan the party. 7 days to set the trap. 7 days to make sure that when I left this house, I would be leaving behind nothing but scorched earth. The eviction had begun, but they didn't know who was really being kicked out. 3 days. That was all I had left in the house that had been my sanctuary for 40 years. The boxes were stacked high in the living room towers of cardboard filled with a lifetime of memories that my son considered junk. I hadn't slept. I had spent the last 72 hours refining the trap, oiling the hinges of the cage I was about to drop on the boy who thought he was a man. It was Thursday morning. The movers were scheduled for Monday. But I knew Jamal. I knew his impatience. I knew he would come early to make sure the old man wasn't hiding any copper wire he could sell, or to make sure I hadn't died in my sleep and complicated his closing schedule. I was ready. I sat in the kitchen, the only room that wasn't completely dismantled. On the table sat my old landline phone, the beige plastic yellowed with age. I had Denzel on speed dial. We had rehearsed this. It had to be perfect. At 9 in the morning, I heard the roar of his engine. He didn't park on the street. He pulled his leased Mercedes right onto the lawn, the tires crushing the hydrangeas Beatrice had planted the spring before she died. He didn't care. To him, it was already a construction site. He stormed into the house, his phone pressed to his ear, arguing with someone about interest rates and closing costs. He was wearing a suit that was too blue, too tight, and too loud. He looked like a man trying to convince the world he owned it while secretly terrified the rent was due. I waited until his shadow crossed the threshold of the kitchen. I waited until I saw the sneer form on his lips as he looked at me sitting there with a cup of coffee. Then I pressed the speaker button. Denzel's voice filled the room, crisp and professional, cutting through the humid air like a knife. So, Mr. Coleman, just to confirm, we are looking at a lump sum payment. After taxes, the total payout will be approximately $148 million. Jamal stopped. He didn't just stop walking, he stopped breathing. His phone slowly lowered from his ear. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at the phone on the table, then at me, then back at the phone. I leaned into the receiver, my voice calm, the voice of a man discussing the weather. Yes, that sounds correct. 148 million. And you have the ticket safe, I have it. Denzel said, following the script perfectly. "But you need to bring the physical claim form to the lottery headquarters on Friday. We need to validate the serial number from the original purchase. Do not lose that receipt, Booker." "I won't," I said. "I'll be there Friday. Thank you." I hung up. The click echoed in the silence. I didn't look at Jamal. I picked up my coffee and took a sip. I could feel his eyes on me. They were burning. I could hear the gears in his head grinding, trying to process what he had just heard. 148 million. The number was too big for him to comprehend, yet it was the only language he spoke. "Pops," his voice was a croak. What was that?" I looked up, feigning surprise. "Oh, Jamal, I didn't hear you come in. Just handling some business." "Business?" He took a step closer, his eyes wide manic. He said 148 million. "Pops, what is going on? Did you win something?" I shrugged, playing the part of the senile old fool he thought I was. "Oh, that. Yes, I think I did. Remember that ticket you gave me for Father's Day?" His face went pale. All the blood drained out of it, leaving him looking like a wax figure melting in the heat. The ticket. The $2.50 joke. The trash he had thrown at me. He looked at his hands. He looked at the table. He looked at the breast pocket of my shirt. It was empty. You won," he whispered. "With that ticket, I think so," I said, scratching my head. I checked the numbers. They looked right. But you know my eyes aren't what they used to be. Panic exploded in his eyes. Pure, unadulterated panic. He remembered. I saw the memory hit him like a physical blow. He remembered Tiffany. He remembered her laugh. He remembered her foot kicking the ticket across the floor. He remembered calling it trash. "Where is it?" he screamed, lunging at the table. "Where is the ticket, Pops?" I recoiled, acting afraid. I don't know. I had it. I thought I put it somewhere safe. Or maybe I dropped it. Tiffany said it was garbage. Maybe she threw it out. "No," he howled. He spun around, his eyes scanning the kitchen floor. It was dirty, covered in dust bunnies and the debris of packing. He looked at the spot where he had stood 3 days ago. He looked at the stove. He looked at the trash can. He dropped to his knees. My son, the man who wouldn't be caught dead in scuffed shoes, was crawling on the linoleum floor in a $2,000 suit. He was sweeping his hands under the cabinets, throwing aside empty boxes, tearing at the trash bags. "Where is it? Where is it?" He kept muttering, sweat beading on his forehead. I watched him. It was pathetic. It was satisfying. Then he stopped. He was on his stomach, his face pressed against the floor, looking under the old refrigerator. The same refrigerator he had made fun of for being noisy. He reached his arm into the dark gap, straining his face, turning red. He grunted. He stretched further. "Gotcha," he whispered. He pulled his arm out. In his hand, covered in gray dust and a cobweb, was the ticket. He sat up, leaning against the dishwasher, breathing hard. He wiped the dust off the thermal paper with his silk tie. He didn't care about the stain. He only cared about the numbers. He pulled out his phone. His fingers were shaking so hard he dropped it twice. He finally unlocked it and typed in the winning numbers from Tuesday night. He looked at the phone. He looked at the ticket. He looked at the phone again. I saw the moment his soul left his body and was replaced by pure greed. His eyes dilated. His mouth twitched into a smile that was terrifying to behold. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was a smile of possession. He looked at me. For a second, I thought he was going to tell me. I thought he was going to scream, "We won, Pops, we're rich." I thought he was going to call Tiffany, but he didn't. He looked at the phone in his hand, and I saw the calculation. If he told Tiffany, she would want half. If he told Tiffany, her parents would want a cut. If he told Tiffany, he wouldn't be the king. He would just be the husband of a rich woman. He slowly lowered the phone. He looked at the ticket one last time, then folded it and slid it into his own jacket pocket. He buttoned the jacket. He smoothed his hair. He stood up. He didn't call his wife. He didn't call his in-laws. He looked at me, and the transformation was instantaneous. The frantic, sweating man vanished. In his place stood the loving, concerned son. It was the worst acting performance I had ever seen, but he committed to it. "Pops," he said, his voice dripping with fake honey. "Oh my God, Pops. Look at you." "What?" I asked, confused. "Did you find it? Is it trash?" He walked over to me. He knelt down beside my chair, ignoring the dust on his knees. He took my hand. His palms were clammy. "Pops, listen to me. We need to talk. I've been thinking. I've been thinking a lot about us. About this house. About everything." He squeezed my hand. It took everything in me not to pull away. "I was wrong, Pops," he said, looking deep into my eyes with a sincerity that made me want to vomit. "I was so wrong. I was stressed. The business, the new condo, Tiffany, it got to me. But seeing you here sitting in this kitchen, I realized something." "What did you realize, son?" I asked. "That I can't do this to you?" He said, a single fake tear forming in the corner of his eye. "I can't send you to a facility. You're my father. You raised me. You sacrificed everything for me. How could I live with myself if I put you in a home?" He stood up and pulled out his phone again. He dialed a number. "Hello. Yes, this is Jamal Coleman. I'm calling about the closing on the property at 73rd Street. Yes. Cancel it. No, I don't care about the contract. I said cancel it. I'm not selling. My father is not moving." He hung up. He looked at me like he was Superman. "I canceled it, Pops. The house is yours. But listen, you can't stay here alone. It's not safe. The neighborhood is changing and you need family around you." He put his hand on my shoulder. "I want you to come live with us, Pops. With me and Tiffany, in the penthouse. We have a guest room. It's huge. It has its own bathroom. You can see the lake. We'll take care of you. We'll be a real family again. Just you, me, and Tiffany." I looked at him. I looked at the pocket where he had hidden my ticket. He wasn't inviting me to live with him. He was kidnapping me. He was moving the asset to a secure location. He needed me close so he could get me to sign the claim form. He needed me dependent on him so he could control the money. "Why, Jamal?" I asked softly. "Why the change? 5 minutes ago I was a burden. 5 minutes ago I was trash. You kicked me out. You sold my memories. Why?" He smiled. It was a shark's smile. "Because we're family, Pops," he said. "And family sticks together, no matter what." I looked at him. I saw the desperation behind the greed. I saw the 148 million reasons he was suddenly my best friend. "Okay, son," I said. "Okay." He exhaled a sound of pure relief. "Good," he said. "Great. Pack your bag, Pops. Just the essentials. We're leaving now. We're going home." He turned to grab my suitcase, eager to get me out of there, eager to get me into his car and under his control. He didn't see the look on my face. He didn't see the cold fire in my eyes. He thought he had caught a senile old fish. He didn't know he had just pulled a great white shark into the boat. I stood up. I took my hat off the rack. "Let's go home, son," I said. As I walked out the door of my house for the last time, I didn't look back. I looked forward. I looked at the back of my son's head. And I smiled. Because the show was just beginning. And he had just bought a front row ticket to his own destruction. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor was silent save for the hum of machinery lifting us toward a sky my son couldn't afford. Jamal stood next to me, vibrating with a nervous energy that he tried to pass off as excitement. He kept checking his reflection in the mirrored walls, adjusting his tie, smoothing his hair, making sure the mask of the successful businessman was firmly in place. I stood in the corner, clutching my battered suitcase, looking like a janitor who had gotten lost on his way to the basement. When the doors slid open, we stepped into a foyer that screamed money. Marble floors, abstract art that looked like spilled paint, and a view of the Chicago skyline that would take your breath away if you didn't know the rent was 3 months overdue. This was the stage Jamal had built for his life, a set designed for a play called Success that was about to be canceled for lack of funds. Tiffany was in the living room, lounging on a white leather sofa that looked like it had never been sat on. She was scrolling through her phone, a glass of wine in her hand. When she saw us, she didn't smile. She didn't stand up. She lowered her sunglasses, which she was wearing indoors, and looked at me with a mixture of confusion and pure, unadulterated disgust. "What is this?" she asked, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Why is he here, Jamal? I thought the movers were taking him to Shady Pines today." Jamal flinched. He held up a hand, rushing toward her. "Babe, wait. Plans changed." "Changed," she snapped, standing up. She was wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. "We talked about this. We don't have space. We don't have the patience. And frankly, Jamal, he smells like old soup. I can't have that smell in my upholstery." I stood by the door gripping the handle of my suitcase. Old Soup. That was the scent of the man who worked double shifts to pay for her engagement ring. Jamal grabbed her by the shoulders. He pulled her close, leaning into her ear. I saw him whisper. It wasn't a sweet nothing. It was a number. 148 million. I saw the exact moment the words hit her brain. Her body went rigid. Her eyes, which had been narrowed in anger, snapped open. She looked at Jamal, searching his face for a lie. He nodded, his eyes manic and serious. She looked at me. The transformation was terrifying. It was instant. The disgust vanished, replaced by a smile so wide and so bright it looked painful. It was the smile of a predator spotting a wounded gazelle. It was the smile of a woman who just realized the Old Soup was actually liquid gold. "Dad," she shrieked, dropping her wine glass on the table. It didn't break, but wine sloshed over the rim. She ran across the room, her silk robe billowing behind her. She threw her arms around me, hugging me so tight I thought she might check my pockets right then and there. "Oh, Dad. I am so sorry. I didn't know you were coming today. Jamal is terrible at communicating. We are so happy you're here." She pulled back, holding me at arm's length, looking at me with eyes that shone like high beams. "You look tired. You must be exhausted. Come sit down. Let me take your coat. Let me take your bag." She snatched my suitcase from my hand. It was heavy, filled with the few things I had saved from the purge, but she carried it like it was a feather. She placed it gently by the door, patting it as if it were a pet. Jamal was grinning, looking relieved. "See, Pops, I told you. Family." Tiffany clapped her hands. "Dinner. We were just about to order." Jamal canceled the pizza. "But I already ordered the pepperoni," Jamal started. "Cancel it," she barked, her voice dropping for a split second before bouncing back up to a chirpy soprano. "We are not feeding Dad cold pizza. Tonight is a celebration. We're ordering from the Prime Cut." The Prime Cut. The most expensive steakhouse in the city. The place where steaks cost 3 figures and they charge you for the bread. I sat on the white leather sofa. I felt like I was defiling it. Tiffany bustled around, fluffing pillows behind my back, bringing me a bottle of water that looked like it had been bottled by monks in the Alps. "While we wait, we need wine," she declared. "Jamal, get the Cabernet, the 98. Jamal's eyes widened. The 98, babe, we were saving that for a special occasion. She cut him off, staring him down. "And having Dad here is the most special occasion of all. Go." Jamal ran to the wine fridge. He came back with a bottle covered in dust. He opened it with trembling hands. He poured 3 glasses. He handed one to me, "To family," Tiffany said, clinking her glass against mine. "To new beginnings. And to unexpected blessings." I took a sip. It tasted like vinegar and lies. An hour later, the food arrived. It was a feast. Wagyu beef that melted in your mouth, truffle mashed potatoes, grilled asparagus. It was served on fine china, eaten with heavy silver forks. We sat at their glass dining table overlooking the city lights. They watched me eat. They didn't eat much themselves. They just watched my hands, my mouth, my pockets. They were like vultures waiting for the animal to die so they could pick the bones clean. So Dad, Tiffany began leaning forward, her cleavage pressing against the edge of the table. "Jamal tells me you had some interesting news today." I chewed a piece of steak slowly. "News?" I asked. "Oh, you mean the ticket?" "Yes, the ticket." She laughed, a sound like chimes in a graveyard. "Isn't that amazing? Jamal told me he gave it to you. What a coincidence, right?" "It was a blessing," Jamal added, refilling my glass. "A true blessing. But you know, Pop's money. Money is a complicated thing." "It is?" I asked. "Oh, absolutely," Tiffany said, her face grave. "It changes people. It attracts the wrong kind of attention. Scammers, thieves, distant relatives you haven't seen in years. It can be very dangerous for a man of your vintage. Vintage. I was a fine wine now, not Old Soup. That's why we were thinking," Jamal said, putting his fork down. "We want to protect you, Pops. We have experience with finances. We know how to handle large assets." Tiffany nodded vigorously. "Exactly. We have a financial advisor. A top guy. He handles millions. We think it would be best if you let us hold on to the ticket for you, just for safekeeping, until we can set up a trust. For your benefit, of course." We can put it in our safe, Jamal said. It's fireproof, waterproof. It's the safest place in Chicago. Much safer than wherever you have it now. I looked at them. They were leaning in their eyes, desperate, their smiles tight. They were gaslighting me. They were trying to convince me that I was too old, too stupid, too fragile to hold a piece of paper. They wanted to take the only leverage I had and lock it away in a box I couldn't open. They wanted to become my conservators. They wanted to be the guardians of the gold, and I would be the allowance boy. I see, I said slowly. That makes sense. It is a lot of responsibility. Exactly, Tiffany said, reaching her hand across the table. So why don't you give it to us now? We can lock it up tonight, then we can all sleep soundly. I looked at her hand. Manicured nails, diamond rings, the hand of a woman who had kicked that ticket across the floor 3 days ago. I reached into my breast pocket. Their eyes followed my hand. They stopped breathing. I patted the pocket. I frowned. I patted my other pocket, then my pants pockets. I stood up, patting my sides, checking the inside of the jacket. What's wrong? Jamal asked, his voice rising in panic. Pops, what are you doing? It's not here, I mumbled, looking around the floor. I thought I put it in my pocket. Or maybe I put it in the suitcase. The color drained from their faces faster than water from a tub. You don't know where it is, Tiffany whispered, her voice trembling. I forgot, I said, looking at them with wide, confused eyes. My memory, you know how it is. Sometimes I put things in places and I just forget. Jamal knocked his chair over as he stood up. The suitcase, he yelled. He ran to the foyer. Tiffany was right behind him, screaming, Don't tell me you lost it, Booker. Don't you dare tell me you lost $148 million. They fell upon my battered suitcase like wild animals. They ripped the zipper open. They dumped my clothes onto the marble floor, my underwear, my old shirts, my socks with the holes in the heels. They threw them aside, shaking them, turning pockets inside out. I stood in the doorway of the dining room watching them. They were on their knees, surrounded by my poverty, frantically searching for their salvation. They looked ridiculous. They looked pathetic. I took another sip of the $500 wine. It tasted better this time. It tasted like victory. Where is it? Jamal screamed, holding up a pair of my trousers and shaking them violently. Where is the ticket, Pops? Think I don't know, I said softly. I don't know. They tore the lining of the suitcase. They checked the shoes. They checked the toiletry bag. And as I watched them destroy my belongings in a frenzy of greed, I knew one thing for sure. They would never find it. Because the real ticket was safe in a vault across town. But tonight I was going to make them work for it. Tonight I was going to make them sweat. The search for the ticket had turned my son's pristine penthouse into a war zone. Designer cushions were gutted, drawers were ripped from their tracks, and the contents of my life were scattered across the Italian marble floor like debris from a shipwreck. Jamal was sweating through his silk shirt, his eyes darting frantically around the room. Tiffany was on her hands and knees, ruining a manicure that cost more than my monthly grocery bill, peering under the sofa with the desperation of a junkie looking for a fix. They were tearing the world apart for a piece of paper they had kicked across a kitchen floor 3 days ago. I sat in the corner watching them. I played the part of the confused old man, perfectly wringing my hands and muttering about my memory. But my mind was sharp as a razor. I knew exactly where the ticket was. It was currently tucked inside the lining of my left sock. But I knew I couldn't keep it there. They would search me next. They would strip me down if they had to. I needed a hiding place that was right in front of their faces, a place so repulsive to their expensive tastes that they wouldn't dare touch it. I asked to use the bathroom. Jamal waved me away without looking too busy ripping the backing off a framed picture of his mother to care. I shuffled into the guest bedroom they had assigned me. It was sterile white and cold. My battered suitcase lay open on the bed, its contents already ransacked. I walked to the closet. There, sitting in the corner, was a pair of old leather work boots. I had bought them in 1995. The leather was cracked. The soles were worn thin, and they smelled faintly of diesel and hard labor. Tiffany had already threatened to throw them in the incinerator twice since we arrived. I sat on the edge of the bed and slipped the ticket out of my sock. I folded it into a tight square smaller than a postage stamp. I reached into the right boot, pushing my fingers deep into the toe past the worn insole until I found a small tear in the lining. I slid the ticket inside, smoothing the leather back down. It was invisible. I I stood up and kicked the boots deeper into the closet, piling a heap of dirty laundry on top of them. Just as I finished, the door flew open. Tiffany stood there, her hair disheveled, her eyes manic. "What are you doing in here?" she demanded. "Are you hiding it? Do you have it?" "I'm just organizing," I stammered, looking down at my feet. She scoffed, walking into the room and kicking the pile of laundry. "Ugh, these clothes smell like mildew. And those boots," she pointed a manicured finger at my hiding spot. "Those are going in the trash tomorrow, Booker. I don't want that poverty smell in my house." I didn't argue. I just nodded. "Yes, Tiffany, whatever you say." She glared at me, then spun on her heel and marched out. She didn't check the boots. She wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. My fortune was safe in the one place her greed couldn't reach, the symbol of my hard work. By the next morning, the dynamic had shifted. The frantic energy was gone, replaced by a cold, predatory calculation. Jamal and Tiffany sat at the breakfast table whispering. When I walked in, they stopped abruptly. Jamal stood up, putting on a smile that looked like it hurt his face. "Good morning, Pops," he said, pulling out a chair for me. "Sit down. We have a guest coming today." "A guest?" I asked, eyeing the spread of fruit and pastries I knew I wouldn't be allowed to enjoy fully. "Yes, a friend of Preston's," Tiffany said, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Dr. Vance. He's a specialist. He's going to just chat with you. Check on your health." I knew exactly what this was. I had seen Dr. Vance at the country club photos on Preston's mantle. He was a golf buddy, a man who likely traded prescriptions for tea times. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Dr. Reginald Vance walked in carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it cost more than my first car. He was a small man with a fake tan and teeth that were too white for his age. He shook Jamal's hand with a firm, conspiratorial grip. "Is this the patient?" Vance asked, looking at me over the rim of his glasses. "This is my father," Jamal said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "He's been confused lately, doctor. Forgetful. He thinks he won the lottery, but he can't find the ticket. He gets agitated. We're worried he might hurt himself or destroy valuable assets in a fit of dementia." I sat there, my hands folded, listening to my son paint a picture of a madman. He was building a cage out of words. Dr. Vance sat opposite me. He didn't take my blood pressure. He didn't listen to my heart. He just looked at me with bored, arrogant eyes. "So, Booker," he said, "tell me about this ticket. Do you see it now? Is it in the room with us?" I looked at him. I looked at the boots in the closet down the hall. "I had a ticket," I said softly. "My son gave it to me, for Father's Day." Vance scribbled something on a notepad. "Fixation on insignificant objects," he muttered to himself, loud enough for everyone to hear. "And where is this ticket now, Booker?" "I lost it," I said. "I forget things." Vance nodded, a smug smile playing on his lips. Typical presentation. Short-term memory degradation paired with delusions of grandeur. He thinks a $2 ticket is a fortune. It's a coping mechanism for his loss of agency. He stood up, closing his notebook. "I've seen enough." He walked over to Jamal and Tiffany, who were hovering by the kitchen island like vultures. I strained my ears, but they moved into the hallway, their voices dropping to a murmur. I needed to hear them. I needed to know the timeline. I stood up and shuffled toward the guest room, pretending to head for a nap. But I didn't go to my room. I stopped by the door to the nursery. The door was ajar. This was the room prepared for the grandchild. I had never met a baby born 3 months ago that Tiffany refused to bring around because she said my house was unsanitary. I stepped inside. It was a shrine to excess. A crib that looked like a carriage, mountains of unopened toys. And on the changing table, a high-tech baby monitor. The receiver unit was missing, likely with Tiffany, but the base station was transmitting. And next to it, mistakenly left on the shelf, was the other parent unit, the one Jamal usually kept in his office. It was on. The volume was turned up. I picked it up and held it to my ear. Their voices came through crystal clear, transmitted from the hallway just 30 feet away. "Clearly incompetent," Dr. Vance was saying. "His cognitive decline is rapid. If he actually had a winning ticket, he would likely flush it down the toilet or hand it to a stranger. He is a danger to his own financial well-being." "So what do we do?" Jamal asked. His voice was desperate. "We can't find the ticket, doctor, but if he finds it, if he remembers, we need legal control." "I can sign an emergency affidavit," Vance said smoothly. "I'll attest that he is suffering from advanced senile dementia and paranoid delusions. You take that to a judge first thing Monday morning. You file for emergency guardianship. Guardianship, Tiffany asked. What does that cover? Everything. Vance replied. His person, his estate, his assets. Once the judge signs that order, Booker Coleman ceases to be a legal entity. He becomes a child in the eyes of the law. You will have full control over his bank accounts, his property, and yes, any lottery winnings he might claim. He won't be able to cash a check without your signature. And the cost, Jamal asked. Standard fee. Vance chuckled. Plus a small consultation bonus. Shall we say 10,000? Done, Jamal said instantly. Just get us the papers by tonight. I lowered the monitor. My hand was trembling, but not from age. It was trembling from rage. They weren't just going to steal the money. They were going to steal me. They were going to erase my rights, strip me of my manhood, and reduce me to a line item in their budget. They were going to declare me insane to cover their own greed. I looked around the nursery. I looked at the crib where my grandson slept, oblivious to the snakes he had for parents. They were willing to destroy 3 generations of Coleman men for a penthouse and a trip to Dubai. I put the monitor back on the shelf exactly as I found it. I walked back to my guest room and sat on the bed. I looked at the closet where my old boots sat under a pile of dirty laundry. Emergency guardianship. Monday morning. That gave me 48 hours. They thought I was confused. They thought I was a senile old man who lost things. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small prepaid burner phone I had bought with cash the day I went to Denzel's. I hadn't turned it on since. I pressed the power button. I dialed Denzel's number. He picked up on the first ring. It's happening, I whispered. They brought in a doctor. They're filing for guardianship on Monday. I heard the rustle of papers on the other end. Monday. Denzel said, his voice sharp. That's cutting it close, Booker. If they get that order signed, they freeze everything. Even if you have the ticket, they can block the payout. We need to move. I know, I said. I'm ready. What's the plan? Denzel asked. They want a crazy old man, I said, looking at my reflection in the mirror. I looked tired. I looked worn. But my eyes were clear. I'll give them a crazy old man. But I need you to set up a meeting. Sunday night. Sunday, Denzel asked. With who? With everyone, I said. Jamal, Tiffany, Preston, the creditors. Jamal is hiding from. And the press. The press, Booker. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said. Jamal loves an audience. He loves to show off. I'm going to give him the biggest audience of his life. Tell him I found the ticket. Denzel was silent for a moment, then he chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. You're a dangerous man, Booker Coleman. I'm just a father, I said. A father who's about to teach his son the most expensive lesson he'll ever learn. I hung up and hid the phone under the mattress. I lay back on the bed and closed my eyes. I didn't sleep. I waited for the door to open. I waited for the performance to begin. They wanted to play Dr. Fine. We'll play doctor. But when the surgery starts, I'm going to be the one holding the scalpel. The phone call happened on the balcony, but Tiffany's voice was so shrill it drifted through the glass doors like a siren announcing an air raid. I sat in the living room pretending to watch a nature documentary, but my ears were tuned to the frequency of greed. I heard her say the words, "Forget Dubai, Mom. Dubai is peanuts. We are talking about dynasty money. We are talking about 9 figures. Get here now. And bring Dad. We need the closer." She hung up and walked back inside, a smug satisfaction plastered on her face. She looked at me not with the disgust she usually held, but with the possessive gleam of a child looking at a piggy bank she was about to smash open. The Dubai trip, the $55,000 vacation that had been the crown jewel of Father's Day, was dead. It had been sacrificed on the altar of the $148 million they thought was lost in my dementia-addled brain. They didn't want a vacation anymore. They wanted the vault. An hour later, the doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite chime. It was an invasion. I looked out the window and saw a silver Mercedes-Benz S-Class parked illegally in the loading zone downstairs. It was polished to a mirror shine, a symbol of wealth that I suspected was entirely leased. Preston and Caroline swept into the penthouse like royalty visiting the peasants. Caroline was wearing a fur coat despite it being 60 degrees, and Preston was carrying huge ribbon-wrapped boxes. They didn't go to Jamal. They didn't go to Tiffany. They came straight to me. Booker Preston boomed, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. He dropped the boxes on the coffee table and extended a hand that was manicured and soft. "It has been too long, my friend. Far too long. We let life get in the way of family, didn't we? It's a tragedy, a real tragedy." I shook his hand. It felt slippery, like gripping a wet fish. "Hello, Preston," I said. "It's been 3 days. We saw each other at the restaurant." He waved his hand dismissively, a laugh bubbling up from his throat that sounded like rocks rattling in a tin can. That was social. That was a show. I mean, really talk. Man to man. Father to father. He sat down on the sofa next to me, invading my personal space, smelling of expensive scotch and desperation. Caroline sat on the other side, boxing me in. "We brought you something," Caroline cooed. Her face stretched tight by one too many surgeries. "Open it, Booker. It's just a little token. To show we care." I reached for the first box. It was a suit. Not just any suit. A charcoal gray bespoke Italian wool suit. It looked expensive. It felt expensive. And it was exactly the kind of thing a man like Preston wore to convince people he wasn't drowning in debt. And this, Preston said, handing me a smaller velvet box. I opened it. A gold watch. Heavy. Ostentatious. The kind of watch that screams, "Look at me," because I have nothing else to say. "For you," Preston said, placing a hand on my knee. "A man of your stature shouldn't be wearing rags, Booker. You deserve the best. You've worked hard. And now it's time to reap the rewards." I looked at the watch. It was ticking loudly, counting down the seconds until he asked for the money. I knew this game. It was the oldest con in the book. The sweetener before the poison. "Thank you," I said, closing the box. "This is very generous." "Generous." Preston scoffed, standing up and walking to Jamal's wet bar. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. He didn't ask if I drank. He just assumed I needed to be lubricated. He handed me a glass. Nonsense. It's what family does. We lift each other up. He took a long sip, his eyes scanning the room, assessing the value of everything in sight. He looked at Jamal, who was standing by the kitchen island looking nervous. He looked at Tiffany, who gave him a subtle nod. The stage was set. The closer was ready to pitch. Booker Preston began settling back onto the sofa. Tiffany told us about the situation, the ticket, the confusion, the memory lapses. I took a sip of the scotch. It burned. I nodded slowly, playing the part. "Yes, it's terrible. I put it somewhere safe, but my mind, it plays tricks on me." "Of course it does," Preston said, his voice dripping with sympathy. "It's stress, Booker. The burden of wealth. It's too much for one man to carry alone, especially at our age." The sharks start circling. The taxman comes knocking. It's a minefield. He leaned in closer, his breath hot on my face. "That's why I'm here, Booker, to offer you a lifeline." "A partnership." "A partnership?" I asked, blinking my eyes innocently. "Yes. You see, my firm, Sterling Heights Development, we handle high net worth portfolios. We specialize in protecting assets for families just like ours. We create generational wealth. I want to propose an alliance." He pulled a folded document from his inside jacket pocket. It was thick, bound in blue paper. "This is a limited power of attorney specifically for investment purposes," Preston said, smoothing the paper on his knee. "It authorizes me to place your winnings, once you find the ticket, of course, into a secure, high-yield real estate fund. My fund. We're building luxury condos in Miami. Guaranteed returns. Triple the market rate." I looked at the paper, then I looked at him. He wasn't offering to help me. He was asking me to bail him out. I knew about the real estate market. I read the papers. I knew developers like Preston were over-leveraged, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, praying for a miracle before the banks foreclosed. I was his miracle. $148 million would fill a lot of holes in his sinking ship. He wanted me to sign over the money before I even claimed it. He wanted to lock it into his failing company so he could pay off his own creditors and pretend he was still a king. "But Preston," I said, my voice trembling slightly, playing the confused old man to perfection. "I don't understand. Why do you need my money?" He froze. His smile twitched. "What do you mean, Booker?" I gestured to his watch, to the Mercedes downstairs, to the $55,000 Dubai trip he had accepted 3 days ago. "You're rich, Preston. You gave Jamal that trip. You drive that big car. You belong to the country club. Why would a man with so much money need the pennies of an old dock worker?" The room went silent. Jamal looked at the floor. Tiffany stopped breathing. Caroline adjusted her fur coat, looking uncomfortable. Preston's face turned a shade of red that clashed with his tie. He laughed, but it was a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Oh, Booker. You misunderstand. It's not about needing money. It's about leveraging it. The rich don't spend their own money, Booker. We invest other people's money. That's how the game is played. I'm trying to give you access to the big leagues." I looked him in the eye. I let the silence stretch out. I let him sweat. I saw the beads of perspiration forming on his upper lip. I saw the twitch in his left eye. He was desperate. He was terrified. The Mercedes was probably leased. The trip to Dubai was probably put on a credit card that was maxed out. He was a fraud wrapped in an expensive suit. "I see," I said slowly. "So if I sign this, you take care of everything." "Everything," Preston said, eager, leaning forward. "You won't have to worry about a thing. We pay your bills. We give you a monthly allowance. You live like a king right here with Jamal and Tiffany, and the principal grows in my fund safe and sound. A monthly allowance, just like Veronica had offered, just like they all did. They wanted to turn me into a child." I looked at the document. I looked at Jamal. My son was watching me with hope in his eyes. He wanted me to sign. He wanted his father-in-law to save him. He didn't care that he was selling his own father down the river to a con artist. I took the pen Preston offered. I held it over the paper. I think this sounds like a good idea," I said. Preston exhaled a sound like a tire deflating. Caroline clapped her hands softly. Tiffany smiled a predatory grin. But I said, pulling the pen back, "I can't sign it now." "Why not?" Preston snapped, his patience fraying. "Because I haven't found the ticket yet," I said. "And because this is a big moment. A huge moment. $148 million. We shouldn't do this in a living room. We should celebrate." "Celebrate?" Jamal asked. "Yes," I said, my voice gaining strength. "If I am going to join your firm, Preston, if I am going to be an investor, I want to be treated like one. I want a party, a big one." "A party?" Preston asked, confused. "On Sunday," I said. "Sunday night, here, or somewhere better. You invite your partners, Jamal invites his friends, we invite the whole world, and at the party, I will announce that I found the ticket, and I will sign your papers in front of everyone." Preston looked at Jamal. He was calculating. A party meant delay, but a party also meant publicity. It meant he could show off his new whale of a client to his creditors. It meant he could secure more loans on the promise of my money. "Sunday," Preston muttered. That's tight. But I can make calls. I can get the banquet hall at the club." "No," I said. "Not the club. Here, in the penthouse. I want to see the view when I sign my life away." Preston looked at Tiffany. The penthouse wasn't big enough for a gala, but it was big enough for what I had in mind. "Okay," Preston said, seeing the dollar signs dancing in his eyes. "Sunday night. We'll cater it. We'll get champagne. The best." "And one more thing," I added. What Preston asked, his hand already reaching for his phone to start making arrangements. "Invite everyone," I said. "Everyone you owe money to. Everyone Jamal owes money to. I want them all to see that the Colemans pay their debts. I want them to see that we are honorable men." Preston went pale for a second, then he smiled. A greedy, arrogant smile. He thought I was doing him a favor. He thought I was giving him a stage to gloat. "You got it, Booker," he said, slapping my knee. "We'll invite them all. It will be the night of the century." I smiled back. I took a sip of the scotch. It didn't burn anymore. It tasted like justice. "Yes, Preston," I thought. "It will be the night of the century. Just not the way you think." He stood up, energized, manic. He started barking orders at Caroline and Tiffany. "We need a caterer. We need flowers. Gold and white theme. Classy. Jamal, get your guest list ready." I sat there watching them scurry around planning their own execution. They were so blinded by the glare of the gold they thought they had found that they didn't see the cliff they were running toward. I looked at the gold watch in the box. I snapped the lid shut. "Tick-tock, Preston," I whispered to myself. Tick-tock. The silence in the penthouse was heavy, the kind of silence that feels like a held breath before a scream. It was 5 a.m. on Friday. The sun hadn't yet breached the horizon over Lake Michigan, leaving the city in a bruised shade of purple. I lay in the sterile white bed of the guest room listening to the rhythm of the apartment. I heard the hum of the refrigerator, the distant wail of a siren 40 stories down, and the soft, rhythmic snoring of my son from the master suite. Jamal was a heavy sleeper, confident in his victory. He thought he had me trapped. He thought the cameras were enough. He didn't know that I had spent 40 years waking up before the alarm to load crates on the docks. He didn't know that silence was my native language. I slid out of bed, my feet hitting the cold marble floor. I didn't turn on a light. I knew the layout. I moved like a shadow, avoiding the red blinking eyes of the Nest cameras Jamal had installed in the hallway. I knew their blind spots. I had watched him set them up, noting the angles with the eyes of a man who had survived union strikes and dockyard brawls. I hugged the wall, sliding past the nursery where the baby monitor sat, past the kitchen island where they had interrogated me over Wagyu beef. I reached the service elevator in the back hallway. It was meant for deliveries and trash, but it was my escape hatch. I pressed the button and held my breath, praying the chime wouldn't be loud. It arrived with a soft ding that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet apartment. I stepped inside and rode it down to the alley. When I stepped out into the cool morning air, I didn't feel like an old man. I felt like a fugitive. I pulled my collar up and started walking. I didn't look back at the glass tower that held my son and his greed. I walked 3 miles west, back to the neighborhood where people looked you in the eye, back to the bakery with the dusty office above it. Denzel was waiting for me. He had a pot of coffee brewing that smelled like tar and chicory, the smell of honest work. He looked tired, his eyes magnified behind his thick glasses, but he was alert. On his desk sat a stack of documents thick enough to choke a horse. "You're cutting it close," Booker Denzel said, pouring me a mug. "I got word from the clerk at the courthouse. Jamal filed a motion for an emergency hearing on Monday morning, 8 a.m. He's petitioning for full conservatorship. He's claiming you're a danger to yourself and your estate." I took the coffee. My hands were steady. And the ticket. Denzel tapped the safe in the corner. Safe. I verified the numbers again this morning just to make sure I wasn't dreaming. It's $148 million, Booker. It's the kind of money that starts wars. "It already has," I said. Denzel sat down, leaning over the desk. "Listen to me carefully, Booker. This is the law, not a street fight. The ticket is technically your property. But if that judge signs the order on Monday, you cease to be a person in the eyes of the bank. You become a ward. Jamal and Tiffany become your guardians. They can cash that ticket, put it in an account under their control, and legally drain it for administrative fees and care costs until there's nothing left but lint. If they prove you are incompetent, you lose. Period." I looked at the documents on the desk. "So how do we stop them?" "We don't stop them," Denzel said, a slow lawyer's smile spreading across his face. "We let them think they've won." He pushed a document toward me. It was bound in blue paper, looking identical to the one Preston had tried to force on me the night before. "This," Denzel said, "is a revocable living trust. It names the Beatrice Coleman Foundation as the sole beneficiary of all your assets, including lottery winnings. I set up the foundation yesterday. You are the trustee. I am the executor." I flipped through the pages. The legalese was dense, a thicket of words designed to protect and obscure. "And this," Denzel said, sliding a second document on top of it, "is what you are going to sign on Sunday night." I looked at it. It was a power of attorney, but it was different. "It looks like the standard form Preston gave you," Denzel explained. "Same font, same layout. But look at paragraph 4. I squinted. Paragraph 4 didn't grant power to Preston or Jamal. It granted power to the Beatrice Coleman Foundation to manage the assets. "If you sign this on Sunday," Denzel said, "you are legally transferring the ticket to the foundation before the guardianship hearing on Monday. By the time the judge picks up his gavel, you won't own the ticket anymore. The foundation will. And since the foundation is a separate legal entity, Jamal can't touch it even if he becomes your guardian. He'll be the guardian of a man with 0 assets. "It's a shell game," I whispered. "It's the law," Denzel corrected. "But for this to work, they have to believe you are confused. They have to believe you are signing their document. You have to sell it, Booker. You have to be the senile old man they want you to be." "I can do that," I said. "I've been practicing." "There's one more thing," Denzel said, his face growing serious. "To make the guardianship case stick, they need a recent police incident. Something that proves you wander. Something that proves you're lost." I looked at him. I understood what he was asking. He was asking me to humiliate myself, to become the thing I feared most. "You want me to get picked up," I said. "I want you to cement their confidence," Denzel said. "If they think they have a slam-dunk case for Monday, they'll get sloppy on Sunday. They won't read the fine print. They'll just be eager to get your signature and pop the champagne." I finished my coffee. It was bitter. "Do it," I said. I left Denzel's office an hour later. I didn't go back to the penthouse. Not yet. I walked to a park 3 blocks from Jamal's building. I sat on a bench. I mussed my hair. I untucked my shirt. I took off one of my shoes and left it under the bench, putting it back on loosely so the heel crushed down. I waited until I saw a patrol car cruising down the street. I stood up and walked into the middle of the sidewalk. I started looking around, spinning in slow circles, muttering to myself. I called out names. Beatrice, Mama. People walked past me, averting their eyes. They saw a crazy old black man and they looked away. It was easy to be invisible when you were old. The patrol car slowed down. The officer, a young man with a kind face, rolled down the window. "Sir, are you okay?" I looked at him. I let my jaw go slack. I made my eyes wide and watery. I don't know where I am," I stammered. "I'm looking for my wife. She said she'd be at the store." "Beatrice." The officer parked and got out. He approached me slowly, hands open. "Do you have ID, sir? Do you know where you live?" I patted my pockets frantically. I don't know. My son, Jamal. He lives in the sky." "The sky?" the officer asked gently. "The high building?" I pointed a trembling finger toward the skyline. "The glass one. He's a big man. A businessman." The officer checked my wallet, which I had conveniently left with my old address on the ID, but a business card of Jamal's tucked in the front. "Jamal Coleman," the officer read. "Okay, sir. Let's get you out of the cold. We'll give him a call." They put me in the back of the cruiser. It smelled of disinfectant and old sweat. As we drove toward the penthouse, I felt a deep burning shame in my gut. I was a man who had led strikes. I was a man who had raised a family. And here I was playing the fool in the back of a police car. But then I touched the breast pocket of my jacket, feeling the ghost of the ticket I had left with Denzel. I wasn't a fool. I was a general behind enemy lines. When the cruiser pulled up to the entrance of the building, the doorman's eyes bugged out. The officer escorted me into the lobby, holding my arm like I was made of glass. "Mr. Coleman," the doorman asked, rushing over. "Is everything all right?" "We found him wandering on 4th Street, the officer said. He seemed disoriented. "Says his son lives here." 5 minutes later, the elevator doors opened and Jamal stormed out. He was wearing a bathrobe, his feet bare. He looked furious, not worried. Furious. "Pops, what the hell?" he shouted, crossing the lobby. "Sir, is this your father?" the officer asked, stepping between us. "Yes, he's my father," Jamal snapped. He's not well. He has dementia. We were sleeping. He must have slipped out." He grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. "I'm so sorry, officer. We're handling it. We have a hearing on Monday to get him into a facility. He's a danger to himself." The officer nodded sympathetically. "It's tough, man. My granddad was the same way. Just keep an eye on him. Next time he might walk into traffic." Jamal dragged me into the elevator. The doors closed, sealing us in. The moment we were alone, he shoved me. I stumbled, hitting the mirrored wall. "Are you crazy?" he hissed, spit flying from his mouth. "You walked out. Do you know how bad this looks? The doorman saw you. The police saw you. I wanted to get a paper," I mumbled, looking at the floor. "A paper," Jamal screamed. "You almost ruined everything. If you get lost, if you get hurt before Sunday, before you sign those papers." He stopped. He realized what he was saying. He took a breath, smoothing his robe. "Pops, look at me." I looked up. "You can't leave the apartment," he said, his voice slow and menacing. "It's not safe. You are sick. Do you understand you are sick?" We reached the penthouse. Tiffany was waiting, her arms crossed. "The police?" she asked, her voice shrill. "Jamal, tell me the neighbors didn't see the police bringing your father home like a criminal." "He wandered off," Jamal said, pushing me into the living room. "That's it," Tiffany said. "Give me his phone." What, I asked, clutching my pocket. "Your phone booker," she snapped. "You can't be calling people. You can't be wandering around. You need to focus. Give it to me." Jamal stepped forward and reached into my pocket. He pulled out my old flip phone, the one I had used for 10 years. He didn't know about the burner phone taped under the mattress in the guest room. He looked at the flip phone and sneered. "I'm doing this for you, Pops, so you don't get confused." He walked over to a drawer in the kitchen island and threw the phone inside. He locked it. "Now," he said, turning to me, "you are going to go to your room. You are going to sit there, and you are going to rest. We have a big night Sunday. Preston is spending a fortune on this party, and you are going to be the star. Do not mess this up." I looked at the locked drawer. I looked at my son. He thought he had cut my lines of communication. He thought he had isolated me. "Okay, Jamal," I said softly. "I'll go rest." I walked to the guest room. I closed the door. I heard the lock click from the outside. They had locked me in. I sat on the bed. I reached under the mattress and felt the cool plastic of the burner phone. I was a prisoner in a penthouse watched by cameras guarded by my own flesh and blood. But as I sat there listening to them arguing in the other room about how much the police incident might damage their reputation, I smiled. They had fallen for it. They had bought the act hook, line, and sinker. They thought I was a senile old man who needed to be locked up. They didn't know that by locking me in, they had just locked themselves in with the one thing they couldn't control: the truth. And come Sunday night, I was going to set it free. Saturday evening arrived with a tension so thick it felt like humidity before a storm. I was still locked in the guest room, a prisoner in a tower of glass and steel. My burner phone was hidden securely inside the box spring of the mattress, my lifeline to the outside world silent for now. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the muffled sounds of arguments drifting from the living room. Jamal and Tiffany were fraying at the edges. The stress of the upcoming hearing, the fear that I might actually be crazy enough to lose the ticket, and the crushing weight of their secret debts were tearing them apart. Then I heard the footsteps, fast, angry clicks of heels on marble. The door to my room flew open. It was Tiffany. She didn't look at me. She looked at the closet. She was on a warpath fueled by white wine and desperation. She marched straight to the pile of laundry I had kicked into the corner. She began grabbing my shirts, my trousers, my worn-out cardigans, and throwing them into a black garbage bag she had brought with her. "I am done with this smell," she muttered, her voice tight with hysteria. "I am done with this poverty lingering in my house. If we have to keep you here, Booker, you are going to smell like a human being, not a mechanic." She reached the bottom of the pile. There they were, my old work boots. The leather was cracked, stained with oil and the grime of 1,000 shifts. To her, they were radioactive. She reached out with 2 fingers, pinching the top of the right boot as if it were a dead rat. "Disgusting," she hissed. "These are going to the incinerator." She lifted the boot, and that was when gravity played its part in my play, because I had loosened the lining, because I had positioned it just so. When she lifted the boot and shook it in disgust, a small folded piece of thermal paper fluttered out. It danced in the air for a second, caught in the draft of the air conditioning before landing softly on the pristine white carpet. Tiffany froze. She looked at the boot in her hand. She looked at the paper on the floor. Time seemed to stop. I didn't move. I held my breath, feigning the confusion of a man who didn't know what day it was. She dropped the boot. It landed with a heavy thud. She fell to her knees, disregarding her silk dress, and snatched the paper from the carpet. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely unfold it. She smoothed it out. She read the numbers. Then she screamed. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of pure animalistic hunger. It was the sound a starving wolf makes when it finds a carcass in the snow. "Jamal," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Jamal. Get in here. Now." I heard running footsteps. Jamal burst into the room, his eyes wild, expecting a fire or a heart attack. "What? What is it?" Tiffany didn't speak. She couldn't. She just held the paper up to him, her eyes wide, tears of relief streaming down her face. Jamal grabbed it. He looked at it. He pulled his phone from his pocket, his thumbs flying across the screen as he pulled up the lottery results. He looked at the phone. He looked at the paper. He looked at the phone again. "Oh my God," he whispered. He collapsed onto the bed next to me, the air rushing out of his lungs. "Oh my God, it's here. It was in the boot. The whole time it was in the damn boot." He looked at me, and for a second I saw the son I used to know, the boy who was happy just to see me come home from work. But that boy was gone in a blink, replaced by the monster who saw me only as a vessel for cash. "You crazy old man," he laughed, a manic, breathless sound. "You hid it in the boot. You genius, crazy old man." He grabbed Tiffany and pulled her into a hug. They jumped up and down, spinning in circles in the small guest room, clutching the ticket between them like a holy relic. "We're rich," Tiffany screamed. "We're safe. We're actually rich." They forgot I was there. They forgot I was the one who won. To them, I was just the furniture the ticket had been hiding in. Jamal ran out of the room. I heard the pop of a cork from the kitchen. He came back with a bottle of champagne, the foam spilling over his hands onto the floor. He didn't care. He took a swig straight from the bottle, then passed it to Tiffany. To the boot, he roared. To the dirty, smelly, beautiful boot. They dragged me into the living room. They didn't ask if I wanted to come. They just pulled me along like a mascot. They sat me down in the leather armchair. Jamal placed the ticket in the center of the coffee table, weighing it down with a crystal ashtray. He stared at it. He worshipped it. "We need to celebrate," Tiffany said, her eyes glittering. "We need to do this right." She pulled out her phone. She didn't call her parents. She didn't call her friends. She opened the Hermes app. "I'm getting the Birkin," she declared, her thumbs moving in a blur. "The Himalayan crocodile, the one with the diamond hardware. I don't care if there's a wait list. I'll pay double. I'll pay triple." She looked at Jamal. "And what are you getting?" Jamal was already on the phone. "Hello? Yes, this is Jamal Coleman. I was in last week looking at the Ferrari SF90, the red one. Yes, it's still available." "Good. Market sold. I'm wiring the deposit tonight." "No, don't worry about the financing. Cash. All cash." He hung up and dialed another number immediately. This time it was a real estate broker in Miami. "The beach house on Star Island," he said into the phone, pacing the room like a caged tiger. "The one with the private dock. Is it still on the market?" "Good. Draft the contract. We're moving on it." I sat there watching them. I watched them spend money they didn't have. I watched them dig a hole so deep they would never see the sun again. They were drunk on potential. They were high on a future that didn't exist. They didn't check the date. That was the beauty of it. That was the simplicity of the trap. The ticket on the table, the ticket Tiffany had found in my boot, had the right numbers: 4, 12, 18, 26, 44, Powerball 10. Those were my numbers. I played them every week. But the ticket on the table was from last week's drawing. I had bought it 7 days ago. It was a loser. It was worth exactly $0.00. I had kept it in my boot because I always kept my old tickets for a few days, a habit from a lifetime of hoping for a second chance. When I formulated the plan with Denzel, I knew I needed a decoy. I knew they needed to find something to make them feel safe, to make them feel like they had won. The real ticket, the one worth $148 million, was less than 3 feet away from them. It was sewn into the lining of the old navy blue suit jacket I was currently wearing. I could feel it against my ribs, a warm, silent secret. I watched Jamal confirming the wire transfer for the Ferrari. He was using the last of his credit line gambling that the lottery money would hit his account within days to cover the overdraft. He was betting his life on a piece of paper that was already expired. Pops Jamal shouted, turning to me with a grin that looked more like a snarl. "Why aren't you drinking? This is your night. You did it. You actually didn't lose it." I looked at him. I looked at the ticket under the ashtray. I thought I lost it. I mumbled, playing my part. I looked everywhere. "Are you sure that's the one?" "Of course it's the one." Tiffany laughed, buying a $40,000 handbag with a tap of her finger. "Look at the numbers. Booker, it's the jackpot." She didn't look at the date. Why would she? She saw what she wanted to see. Greed blinds you to the details. Greed makes you sloppy. Jamal poured me a glass of champagne. "Drink up, old man. You're going to have the best care money can buy. The best facility. Private room. Ocean view if we can find one in Chicago." He clinked his glass against mine. The sound was hollow. "So, here's the plan," Jamal said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Tomorrow is Saturday. The lottery office is closed, but they open for special claims on Saturday mornings if you make an appointment. I already called my guy. We're going in at 9 a.m. I asked. "Yes, he said firmly. "You, me, and Tiffany. We're going to walk in there. You are going to stand tall. You are going to smile for the cameras if there are any, though we'll try to keep it private. And when they put the paper in front of you, you are going to sign. Sign what I asked. The claim form, Pops, and the transfer order. We're putting the winnings directly into the family trust, the one Preston set up. It's safer that way. You don't want to deal with taxes and accountants at your age. We'll handle the headache. You just enjoy the retirement." He patted my cheek. It was a demeaning, patronizing gesture, like patting a dog that had finally learned a trick. You just have to stand there and smile. "Pops," he said again, "can you do that? Can you just be a good father for one day and do exactly what I say?" I looked at him. I looked at the Ferrari on his phone screen. I looked at the confirmation email for the Miami villa. I can do that, son, I said. I can smile. Good, he said, draining his glass. Now get some sleep. We have a big day tomorrow. We're going to change our lives. He was right. We were going to change our lives. Just not the way he thought. They stayed up for hours celebrating. I went to my room. I lay in the dark, listening to them toast their own brilliance. I listened to them spending my money. I listened to them planning how they would spend their winters in Miami and their summers in Dubai, leaving me to rot in some high-end warehouse for the elderly. I touched the lining of my jacket hanging on the back of the chair. The real ticket crinkled softly. Sleep well, Jamal, I whispered to the darkness. Enjoy your champagne. Because tomorrow morning the hangover is going to be legendary. Tomorrow morning you're going to learn that the devil is in the details, and the date on a lottery ticket is the difference between a king and a fool. The flashing lights of the cameras were blinding, a strobe effect of greed and curiosity that turned the gray morning into a chaotic disco. We stepped out of the black SUV Jamal had hired for the occasion, on credit no doubt, and into a wall of noise. Reporters were shouting my name. Microphones were thrust over the velvet ropes like spears, and the air smelled of ozone and desperation. Jamal gripped my shoulder with a hand that felt more like a claw. He was wearing a new suit, a shimmering silver thing that made him look like a wrapped baked potato. He was sweating despite the cool air conditioning of the car we had just left. He leaned down, his breath hot and smelling of mints and anxiety. "Smile, Pops," he hissed through his teeth. "Don't say a word. Just wave. I'll handle the talking. You're tired. Remember? You're confused." I blinked at the cameras, letting my jaw hang slightly slack, playing the part of the overwhelmed geriatric. Inside I was counting. 1, 2, 3. I was counting the seconds until his world imploded. We walked up the steps of the Illinois Lottery headquarters. Tiffany was on my other side, clutching her new $40,000 Birkin bag as if it contained the nuclear codes. She was beaming, waving to the press like she was royalty. Behind us, Preston and Caroline followed, looking dignified and rich, ready to claim their share of the glory they hadn't earned. We entered the lobby. It was cool and quiet, a stark contrast to the circus outside. A lottery official, a woman with a kind face and a clipboard, approached us. "Mr. Coleman?" she asked, looking at me. Jamal stepped in front of me, puffing out his chest. "I am Jamal Coleman. This is my father, Booker. He's having a bit of a hard time today. The excitement, I'll be handling the claim process on his behalf. We have power of attorney pending." The official frowned slightly but nodded. "Of course. Right this way. We have a private room set up for the verification." We walked down a long hallway lined with posters of smiling winners holding giant checks. I looked at them. They looked happy. They probably didn't have sons who tried to put them in state-run facilities. We entered the room. There was a large table, a few chairs, and a machine that looked like a standard lottery terminal, but bigger, more official. The official sat behind the desk. "Do you have the ticket?" Jamal reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out the thermal paper with a flourish, handling it with 2 fingers, as if it were a fragile historical document. He placed it on the desk, smoothing it out. "There it is," he said, his voice trembling with triumph. "The big one. 148 million. Tiffany squeezed my arm. Her nails dug into my skin. "This is it, Booker," she whispered. "Our lives change now." Yes, I thought. They certainly do. The official picked up the ticket. She looked at the numbers. She nodded. Then she fed it into the machine. The room went silent. The only sound was the whir of the scanner. Jamal was holding his breath. Tiffany was biting her lip. Preston was leaning forward, his eyes locked on the small screen of the terminal. Then a sound cut through the silence. Bzzz. A harsh, discordant electronic rejection. A red light flashed on the terminal. The official frowned. She pulled the ticket out. She looked at it again. She fed it back in. Bzzz. Invalid, she muttered. "That's strange." Jamal chuckled, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Machine's right. Always glitching. Try it again. It's a winner. I checked the numbers 1,000 times. 4, 12, 18, 26, 44. Powerball 10. Those are the numbers." The official looked at the screen. She typed something on her keyboard. She looked at the ticket again, holding it up to the light. "Sir," she said, her voice professional but cold. The machine isn't broken. The numbers match the draw for the current jackpot. See? Jamal shouted, slamming his hand on the table. I told you it's a winner, cut the check. But the official continued, raising her voice slightly to cut him off. This ticket is not for the current draw. What? Jamal asked. The word fell out of his mouth like a stone. This ticket, the official said, pointing to the date printed at the bottom of the slip, is dated June 10th. That was last week's drawing. The winning numbers for that date were completely different. This ticket is a loser. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum sucking all the air out of the room. Jamal stared at her. He blinked. Once. Twice. That's impossible, he whispered. I found it in his boot. It has the numbers. Yes, sir, the official said gently. It has the numbers for the June 17th draw. But the ticket was purchased for the June 10th draw. Whoever bought this played these numbers a week early. And they lost. Jamal snatched the ticket from the desk. He brought it up to his face, his eyes scanning the paper desperately. He read the numbers. Then he read the date. June 10th. He looked at the date on his watch. June 17th. He let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream and wasn't quite a sob. It was the sound of a man watching a Ferrari drive off a cliff with his future inside it. No, he moaned. No, no, no. This is the wrong ticket. This is the wrong damn ticket. He spun around, his eyes wild, searching the room as if the real ticket might be hiding behind the water cooler. Then his eyes landed on me. I was standing there looking at the floor, humming a little tune, playing with the button on my jacket. He lunged. He crossed the distance between us in 2 strides. He grabbed the lapels of my old suit and slammed me against the wall. The impact knocked the wind out of me, but I didn't fight back. I let him shake me. Where is it? He screamed, his face inches from mine, spit flying onto my cheek. Where is the real ticket, old man? I know you have it. You swapped them. You senile old bat. Where did you put it? Jamal, Preston shouted, jumping up. Tiffany was screaming. Oh my God, the Ferrari. The deposit. Jamal didn't hear them. He was shaking me, his fingers digging into my chest. He was going to kill me. I saw it in his eyes. The rage of a man who has lost everything he thought he owned. Tell me, he roared, or I swear to God I will tear this room apart looking for it. I looked at him. I looked into the eyes of the son I had carried on my shoulders. And I let the mask slip just for a fraction of a second, just enough for him to see the cold intelligence behind the confused facade. But then the door opened. A security guard stepped in, attracted by the noise. The official was on her phone, calling for help. I let my eyes go wide with fear. I let my lip tremble. I don't know, I stammered, my voice shaking. You said that one was trash. Remember, in the kitchen, Tiffany kicked it. You said it was garbage. Jamal froze. So I found an old one. I continued looking at the official with teary eyes. I just wanted to help. I put the old one in the boot so you would be happy. I thought if you found a ticket, you wouldn't be mad at me anymore. The official gasped. Oh, you poor man. Jamal let go of me. He stepped back, his hands shaking. He looked at the official who was looking at him with pure disgust. He looked at the security guard who had his hand on his taser. He realized what he had done. He had assaulted his confused elderly father in a government building. He had admitted that he thought the ticket was trash. But the numbers, he whispered. The numbers matched. I played those numbers every week, son, I said softly. For 20 years. You know that. He stared at me. The realization hit him. I had played the same numbers. The ticket in his hand was real. It was just expired. He fell into a chair, burying his face in his hands. He began to weep. Not tears of sorrow, tears of financial ruin. He had spent the money. He had bought the car. He had signed the contracts. And he had nothing to pay for it with. Tiffany walked over to him and slapped him. A sharp cracking sound. You idiot, she screamed. You told me it was real. You told me to buy the bag. You told me to cancel Dubai. She started hitting him with her $40,000 purse. Preston tried to pull her off. Caroline was fanning herself, looking like she might faint. It was chaos. It was beautiful. The official walked over to me. Sir, Are you all right? Do you want to press charges?" I looked at my son, who was sobbing while his wife beat him with a handbag. I looked at the ticket lying on the floor, worthless as a gum wrapper. "No," I said sadly. "He's just disappointed. He really wanted that trip to Dubai." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. I wiped my face. I felt the outline of the real ticket against my ribs. It was warm. It was heavy. "Can we go home now?" I asked. "I'm tired, and I think I left the stove on." The security guard escorted us out. We walked past the cameras again. This time there were no smiles. Jamal covered his face. Tiffany was crying mascara tears. I just walked, looking straight ahead, the confused old man who had made a mistake. But as we got into the SUV, I caught Jamal's eye in the rearview mirror. He was looking at me with a new expression. Fear. He was starting to wonder. He was starting to suspect that maybe, just maybe, the old man wasn't as crazy as he looked. But it was too late. The trap was sprung. The debt was due. And Sunday night was still coming. The basement of the penthouse was not like the basement of my house on 73rd Street. My basement smelled of damp earth and laundry detergent. This basement smelled of ozone concrete and the terrified sweat of the man pacing in front of me. Jamal had dragged me down here after the ride back from the lottery office. He had pushed me into a metal chair in the center of the room, a single bulb hanging above us like an interrogation cell in a bad movie. Tiffany stood by the door, her arms crossed, her eyes burning with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. They hadn't given me lunch. They hadn't given me water. My throat was parched, my stomach growling, but I sat with my back straight, my hands resting on my knees. I looked at my son. He was unraveling. The silver suit was rumpled, the tie loosened, his hair a mess. He looked like a man who had been running for days. "Where is it, Pops?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I know you have it. The machine said the numbers were real. You played them. You played them for 20 years. Where is the ticket for this week? I don't have it," I rasped. "I told you. I lost it. I got confused." "Liar," Tiffany screamed, stepping out of the shadows. She walked up to me and slapped the table next to my chair. "You are lying. You are doing this on purpose. You want to humiliate us." Jamal grabbed my shoulders. He shook me. "Pops, please. You don't understand. I need that ticket. I need it now." "Why, Jamal?" I asked, looking into his bloodshot eyes. "You have the house. You have the money from the sale. Why do you need this so badly?" He let go of me and turned away, running his hands through his hair. He let out a scream of frustration that echoed off the concrete walls. "Because I don't have the house money," he yelled, spinning back to face me. I spent it on the deposit for the Ferrari. I spent it on the down payment for this place. It's gone, Pops. It's all gone." And that wasn't the worst of it. He fell to his knees, crawling toward me, grabbing my legs. "I owe people, Pops. Bad people. I borrowed money to keep the business afloat. $200,000 to loan sharks. They told me if I don't pay by Monday, they're going to kill me. They're going to kill Tiffany." He was sobbing now, burying his face in my lap. I looked down at him. My son, the boy I had protected from the world. He had invited the wolves into his life, and now he wanted me to feed them. "And the $50,000 for the penthouse?" I asked. "Non-refundable," he choked out. "If I don't close next week, I lose it. I lose everything. I'm dead, Pops. I am literally a dead man walking if you don't give me that ticket." I looked at Tiffany. She wasn't crying. She was looking at me with cold calculation. "Search him," she said. Jamal looked up. "What?" "Search him," she repeated. "Strip him. It's on him. He's playing games. He has it taped to his body. Old people do that. They hide money in their underwear." Jamal stood up. He wiped his face. He looked at me. I saw the hesitation, the last shred of decency fighting against the terror. But the terror won. "I'm sorry, Pops," he whispered. He reached for my jacket. I didn't fight him. I stood up. I let him take off my jacket. I let him unbutton my shirt. I let him take off my shoes and my socks. I stood there in my undershirt and boxers, shivering in the cold basement air while my son and his wife went through my clothes like scavengers. They checked the linings. They checked the soles of my shoes. They turned my pockets inside out. They found a handkerchief. They found a few mints. They found my wallet with $10 in it. They didn't find the ticket, because the ticket was currently sitting in a fireproof safe in Denzel's office 3 miles away. I had handed it to him that morning when I went for my walk, the walk Jamal thought was just a senile wandering. Nothing. Jamal whispered, dropping my trousers to the floor. "It's not here." Tiffany let out a shriek of rage. She kicked my shoe across the room. "Where is it?" she screamed at me. "Where did you hide it, you old bat?" I put my clothes back on, slowly buttoning my shirt with dignity. I don't know, I said. Maybe I left it at the house. Maybe I threw it away. I told you my memory is going. Tiffany lunged at me. She grabbed the front of my shirt, her face inches from mine. Stop lying, she hissed. You know exactly where it is. You are doing this to torture us. You hate us. You've always hated us because we're successful and you're nothing. You're just a bitter, jealous old man. I looked at her. I looked at the hatred in her eyes. I don't hate you, Tiffany, I said softly. I pity you. She shoved me back into the chair. I wish you were dead, she screamed. I wish you had died instead of Beatrice. Then we would have the house and the money, and we wouldn't have to deal with your rotting carcass. Just die already. Die and leave us alone. The words hung in the air, heavy, final. Jamal didn't say anything. He didn't defend me, he just stood there looking at the floor, tears streaming down his face. He was complicit. His silence was a signature on her statement. So that's it, I said. That's the truth. You don't need a father, you need an ATM. I need to live, Jamal shouted. I need to not get my legs broken. I need to not go to jail. Then listen to me, I said. My voice changed. It wasn't the voice of a confused old man anymore. It was the voice of the man who ran the dock cruise. It was hard, authoritative. They both stopped. They looked at me. I might know where the ticket is, I said. Jamal's head snapped up. Where is it I need to think? I said. My memory, it comes and goes. But I think I remember hiding it. Tell us, Tiffany demanded. No, I said. Not like this. Not in a basement. I stood up. I walked over to Jamal. I looked him in the eye. You want the ticket? You want to be saved? Then you have to do something for me. Anything, Jamal said. Anything, Pops. I want a party, I said. A party, Jamal asked, confused. Yes. On Saturday night. Tomorrow. Here. In the penthouse. Or, no. Rent a hall. A big one. The biggest one you can find on short notice. Why? Tiffany asked, suspicious. Because if I am going to give you $148 million, I want to do it in style, I said. I want to celebrate. I want to see my son the big shot. I paused, letting the bait dangle. And I want you to invite everyone, I said. Everyone, Jamal asked. Everyone, I repeated. Invite your friends, invite your business partners, invite Preston and Caroline. And Jamal, invite the people you owe money to. What? Jamal went pale. The loan sharks. Tell them you have the money, I said. Tell them you are going to pay them in full on Monday. Invite them to the party to witness the transfer. If they see me give you the ticket, if they see the wealth, they will wait. They will give you time. Jamal thought about it. It was risky, but it was also his only way out. If he could show his creditors that he was solvent, that he was about to be worth millions, they wouldn't kill him. They would kiss his ring. And you, I said to Tiffany, invite your society friends. Show them how generous you are to your poor father-in-law. I sat back down. You do this, I said, and tomorrow night at the party in front of everyone, I will announce where the ticket is, and I will sign it over to you. Publicly, legally, you promise? Jamal asked, his voice shaking with hope. I promise, I said. He looked at Tiffany. She was calculating. She liked the idea of a party. She liked the idea of being the center of attention. She liked the idea of rubbing her wealth in her friends' faces. Fine, she said. We'll do it. But if you pull anything, old man, if you embarrass us, I will make sure you spend the rest of your life in a state hospital where they tie you to the bed. I understand, I said. Jamal helped me up. He brushed the dust off my jacket. He was suddenly gentle again. Okay, Pops, let's get you upstairs. You need to rest. We have a big night tomorrow. We walked to the elevator. They didn't lock me in the basement. They took me back to the guest room. But this time they didn't take my phone. They were too busy planning the gala. They were too busy calling caterers and florists and loan sharks. I sat on the bed. I heard them on the phone in the living room, their voices high with excitement. They were inviting the wolves to dinner. I reached under the mattress and pulled out the burner phone. I sent a single text message to Denzel. It's on. Saturday night, the grand ballroom. Bring the paperwork and bring the camera crew. I lay back on the pillows. I closed my eyes. I wasn't tired. I was energized. They wanted a show. I was going to give them a finale they would never forget. The interrogation was over. The execution was about to begin. And the best part was, they were digging their own graves and they were paying for the shovels. The rented mansion sat on the edge of the city limits, a sprawling estate of white stone and manicured hedges that looked like it belonged in a movie about European royalty. It was the Vanderbilt estate, a venue that cost $25,000 a night to rent money that Jamal had likely borrowed from the very men he was trying to impress. The driveway was lined with valet attendants parking Bentley's Rolls-Royces and Jamal's leased Ferrari, which he had proudly displayed right by the front fountain. It was a stage set for a tragedy illuminated by floodlights that cut through the darkness, trying desperately to outshine the stars. I stood on the balcony of the master suite looking down at the arriving guests. It was a grotesque parade. To the left, walking the red carpet with glasses of champagne in hand, were Tiffany's friends, the social climbers, the influencers, the people who measured their self-worth in likes and labels. They were laughing, their jewelry flashing in the light, completely unaware that the champagne they were drinking was bought on credit. To the right, entering through a more discreet side door, but being ushered into the same grand ballroom, were the others. The men in dark suits that didn't quite fit around the shoulders, the men with cold eyes and heavy watches, the loan sharks. Jamal called them private equity partners. I called them executioners. They walked with a different rhythm, scanning the room, not for hors d'oeuvres, but for exits and collateral. Jamal was down there greeting them, his smile so tight it looked like a rictus of terror. He was shaking hands, clapping shoulders, playing the part of the magnate, but I could see the sweat glistening on his forehead even from the second floor. He was walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers, and he had invited me to be the safety net. Behind me, the door to the suite opened. Jamal rushed in carrying a garment bag. He was breathless, his eyes wide and manic. "Pops, you're not dressed. People are arriving. The appetizers are being served. We need to go down." He unzipped the bag, revealing a sleek black tuxedo with satin lapels. It was brand new, the tags still dangling from the sleeve. "Put this on," he commanded, tossing it onto the bed. "It's Armani. I got it rushed. You need to look the part, Pops. You're a multi-millionaire tonight. You can't look like you." I looked at the tuxedo. It was a costume. It was a disguise meant to hide the man I was and replace him with the prop he needed. "No," I said. Jamal froze his hand halfway to his tie. "What?" I said. "No," I repeated calmly. "I'm not wearing that." "Pops, don't start with me," he hissed, stepping closer. "There are people down there who will break my legs if they think this is a joke. You need to look respectable. You need to look like you have the money." I walked over to the chair where I had laid out my clothes. It was the navy blue suit, the one I had worn to the Father's Day dinner, the one that smelled of mothballs and cedar, the one I had worn to bury Beatrice. It was threadbare at the elbows and the style was 20 years out of date, but it was mine. It was the uniform of a man who paid his debts. "I'm wearing this," I said, picking up the jacket. Jamal looked at the old suit with pure revulsion. "You can't be serious. You look like a hobo in that thing. It smells, Pops. It smells like failure. It smells like hard work." I corrected him, slipping my arms into the sleeves. "And if I am going to sign over my fortune tonight, Jamal, I am going to do it as Booker Coleman, the dock worker, not as some puppet in a tuxedo." He stared at me, his fists clenching and unclenching. He wanted to hit me. I could see the violence dancing behind his eyes, fueled by stress and fear. But he couldn't. He needed me. He needed me to walk down those stairs, smile, and sign the papers. If he bruised me, if he upset me, the whole house of cards would fall. "Fine," he spat, grabbing the tuxedo and throwing it onto the floor. "Wear the rags, just don't open your mouth until you get on stage. Don't talk to anyone. Don't embrace anyone. Just walk, smile, and sign." I buttoned the jacket. I checked the inside pocket. The real ticket was gone safely in Denzel's hands, but I had placed a folded piece of blank paper there to give it the right weight to give Jamal the illusion of safety. "I'm ready," I said. We walked out of the suite and toward the grand staircase. The noise from the ballroom rose up to meet us, a roar of conversation and clinking glass. As we descended, the crowd turned to look. "There he is," someone shouted. "The man of the hour." It was Preston. He was standing at the bottom of the stairs holding a microphone. His face flushed with triumph. He was wearing a white dinner jacket, looking like a captain of industry on the Titanic. He raised his glass to me. "Ladies and gentlemen," Preston boomed, his voice amplified by the speakers, "please welcome my dear friend, my family, and my new business partner, Mr. Booker Coleman." Applause erupted. It was polite at first, then raucous, as Jamal's creditors joined in clapping not for me but for the money they thought I represented. I reached the bottom of the stairs. Preston threw an arm around my shoulder, pulling me into a side hug that felt like a shakedown. He smelled of gin and expensive cologne. "Look at him," Preston shouted to the crowd. "A man of humble beginnings, a man of integrity. And now the newest anchor investor in Sterling Heights development." He leaned in close to my ear, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Great entrance, Booker. The suit. It's a nice touch. Very man of the people. The investors love that authenticity. Now just play along. The papers are on the podium." He guided me through the crowd. I saw faces I didn't know smiling at me with hungry eyes. I saw Tiffany holding court in the corner, showing off her new Birkin bag to a group of women who looked like they were carved out of plastic. She saw me, and her smile faltered for a second when she saw the suit, but she quickly recovered, raising her glass in a mock salute. Then I saw the sharks. 3 men standing near the bar, not drinking, just watching. They were looking at Jamal. One of them tapped his watch. Jamal nodded frantically, mouthing the words, "It's happening now." Preston led me to a small stage set up at the front of the room. There was a podium, a microphone, and a table with a bottle of champagne and a stack of blue-bound documents. The contract, the trap they had built for me. Jamal jumped onto the stage first. He grabbed the microphone from the stand. "Thank you. Thank you all for coming," he yelled, his energy manic, vibrating at a frequency that made my teeth ache. "Tonight is a special night. Tonight is about family. It's about legacy," he gestured to me. "My father, Booker Coleman, has worked hard his whole life. He sacrificed everything for me. And last week the universe paid him back. $148 million. The crowd gasped. A collective intake of breath fueled by avarice. The sharks at the bar straightened up. But Jamal continued, his voice cracking with emotion. "My father knows that wealth is a heavy burden. He knows that at his age what matters is rest, peace, family. That is why tonight he is making a historic decision. He is entrusting the management of his estate to the people who love him most. To me, to his daughter-in-law, and to our trusted partner, Preston Sterling." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. This was the script. This was the moment I was supposed to nod, look confused but grateful, and sign the papers that would hand him the keys to my life. "Come on up, Pops," Jamal cheered. "Tell them I climbed the 3 steps to the stage." My old shoes sounded heavy on the wood. I walked to the podium. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw greed. I saw envy. I saw the sharks waiting to be fed. I looked at the documents on the table. They were exactly where Denzel said they would be. I looked at Preston, who was nodding encouragingly, a pen already in his hand, ready to thrust it at me. I gripped the sides of the podium. The wood felt cool under my calloused hands. I leaned into the microphone. "Testing," I said. The sound boomed through the hall. The room went silent. Jamal stepped up beside me, whispering, "Just the announcement, Pops. Keep it short. I found the ticket. I'm signing the trust. That's it." I looked at him. I smiled. It was the smile of the father who taught him to ride a bike, the father who held him when he scraped his knee, but it was also the smile of the father who was about to discipline him for the last time. "Thank you, Jamal," I said into the mic. "Thank you for that introduction." I looked at the crowd. "My son says tonight is about legacy." I began, my voice steady and strong, shedding the tremor of age I had worn like a cloak for the last week. "And he is right. It is about what we leave behind. It is about who we are when the lights are off." Jamal frowned. "This wasn't the script. You see," I continued, "my son gave me a gift for Father's Day, a lottery ticket. He gave it to me at a dinner where he spent $55,000 on a man he barely knows while buying me a $2 ticket." A murmur went through the crowd. Preston's smile faltered. Tiffany stopped laughing. "He thought it was trash," I said. "He threw it at me. His wife kicked it under a refrigerator. They called me a burden. They called my home a shack. They planned to put me in a state facility so they could buy a penthouse." "Pops," Jamal hissed, reaching for the mic. "What are you doing? Stop!" I pulled the mic away. But then I said, raising my voice, the numbers hit, $148 million. And suddenly, I wasn't a burden anymore. I was a bank. Suddenly, I wasn't senile. I was a partner. I reached into my pocket. I didn't pull out the ticket. I pulled out the remote control for the projector Denzel had set up earlier that afternoon, disguised as part of the AV equipment. "They think I am confused," I said to the silent room. "They think I am lost. They hired a doctor to declare me incompetent. They forged credit card applications in my name. They invited you all here tonight to witness a robbery. Jamal lunged for me. Pops, no, I pressed the button. Behind me, a massive screen descended from the ceiling. The projector hummed to life. A video appeared. It was grainy black and white, shot from the perspective of a button on a shirt. The audio boomed through the speakers. Make him really lose his mind, Benjamin's voice said clearly. We switch his medications. We hide his things. We tell him he did things he didn't do. In a month, any doctor will certify that he's mentally ill. The crowd gasped. It was a physical reaction, a wave of shock. The video cut to another clip. Tiffany's face filled the screen, distorted by the angle. Lame old man, she sneered. Just die already. Die and leave us alone. I looked at Tiffany in the crowd. She had dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the floor, but no one heard it over the sound of her own voice on the screen, wishing for my death. The video cut again. Preston, sitting on the sofa in the penthouse. The rich don't spend their own money, Booker. We invest other people's money. That's how the game is played. I'm trying to give you access to the big leagues. I pressed the button again. The screen went black. I looked at the sharks by the bar. They weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at Jamal. And they didn't look like investors. They looked like butchers who had just realized the meat was spoiled. I turned to Jamal. He was standing center stage, frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a hook. He looked at the screen, then at the crowd, then at me. Why, he whispered. Because you forgot who raised you, I said, my voice booming without the mic. You forgot that I spent 40 years watching people try to cheat the system on the docks. You thought I was stupid because I was poor. But I wasn't poor, son. I was just honest. I picked up the stack of blue documents from the table, the contract that would have given them everything. I ripped it in half. Then I ripped it again. I threw the pieces into the air like confetti. There is no deal, I said to the room. There is no partnership, and there is no money for anyone in this room. Preston rushed the stage. You senile old fool, you can't do this. We have a verbal agreement. I have investors here. I looked at him. You have nothing, Preston, I said. And judging by the look on those gentlemen's faces by the bar, I'd say you have about 5 minutes to start running. I stepped down from the podium. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I walked through the silence past the weeping Tiffany, past the terrified Preston, past the sharks who were already moving toward my son. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I walked out the front door of the mansion into the cool night air. Denzel was waiting in his old Ford sedan, the engine running. Get in, Booker, he said. The show's over. I got in. As we drove away, I saw the blue lights of police cars approaching from the distance called by Denzel an hour ago. The gala was over. The devil had come to dinner, but he hadn't left with my soul. He had left with my son. The room was silent, waiting for the old man to sign away his life. I stood at the podium looking down at the faces of people who measured worth by the carat and the square foot. Jamal was vibrating beside me, a tuning fork struck by greed. He leaned in, his breath smelling of expensive champagne and cheap fear whispering for me to get on with it, to sign the papers, to make him the king he thought he was born to be. I gripped the sides of the wooden podium. My hands, calloused from 40 years of hauling crates on the freezing Chicago docks, felt strong. They didn't tremble. Not anymore. I looked at my son. I looked at the man who had invited wolves to dinner and expected me to be the main course. Jamal. I said, my voice amplified by the expensive sound system booming off the vaulted ceiling. You asked for a Father's Day gift. You said you wanted a legacy. You said you wanted what was rightfully yours. I paused. The crowd leaned in. The sharks at the bar stopped swirling their drinks. Preston was nodding, his smile so wide it looked like a wound, his pen hovering over the contract on the table. Well, son, I continued, my voice dropping an octave, shedding the raspy tremor of the senile old man I had played for the last week. I am going to give it to you. I am going to give you exactly what you deserve. I reached into the pocket of my worn navy suit. Jamal's eyes followed my hand, expecting the ticket, expecting the golden goose. But I didn't pull out a ticket. I pulled out a small black remote control. I pointed it at the back wall of the ballroom. I pressed the button. A mechanical hum filled the room as a massive projection screen descended from the ceiling, cutting through the dim mood lighting. The guests turned, confusion rippling through the crowd like a wave. Jamal frowned, taking a half step toward me. "Pops, what is this?" "This isn't part of the program." "Watch," I said. "Just watch." The projector flickered to life. A beam of white light cut through the darkness, hitting the screen. The image was grainy at first, black and white, shot from a low angle. It was the perspective of a button on a shirt. It was the perspective of a man everyone thought was asleep. The audio cracked through the speakers, loud and distorted, but undeniable. "We need to act fast," a voice said. It was Jamal's voice. The crowd gasped. It wasn't the polished, charming voice he had used to welcome them. It was the voice of a desperate, cornered rat. The image sharpened. It was the kitchen of the penthouse. Jamal and Tiffany were standing over the island, unaware they were being filmed by the tiny lens Denzel had sewn into my jacket days ago. "We can't wait for him to die," Jamal said on the screen, his face twisted in a sneer. "The house money is gone. I spent it on the deposit. If we don't get control of his assets by Monday, we are finished." On the screen, Tiffany laughed. It was a cold, jagged sound. "He's losing it anyway. Let's just help him along. We switch the meds. We keep him confused. We tell the judge he's a danger to himself. Shady Pines has a bed open. It's a dump, but it's cheap. Once he's in there, he's not our problem anymore." I watched the crowd. The socialites in their designer gowns covered their mouths. The business partners Preston had been wooing looked at each other with wide eyes. This wasn't the story of a loving son taking care of his aging father. This was a conspiracy. This was a crime. Jamal stood frozen on stage. He looked at the screen, then at me, his face draining of all color until he looked like a ghost. "Turn it off," he hissed, lunging for the remote. I sidestepped him easily. I was 75, but I was standing on the solid ground of truth. He was slipping on his own lies. "No," I said into the microphone. "We are just getting started." I pressed the button again. The scene changed. Now it was the living room. I was sitting in the chair, head down, looking frail. Tiffany was standing over me, her face contorted with rage. The camera angle shifted as I had looked up at her. "You useless old man," the Tiffany on the screen screamed. Her voice was shrill, piercing the elegant ballroom. "You are a waste of space. You are a waste of food. You smell like poverty. Why couldn't you just die? Why couldn't you have a heart attack like normal old people so we could get the inheritance without the hassle?" In the ballroom, the real Tiffany dropped her champagne flute. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound echoing in the stunned silence. She looked around, her eyes wild. Her friends, the women she had been trying to impress with her Birkin bag, were backing away from her. They looked at her with revulsion. She had exposed herself as a monster in silk. "That's not me," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "That's edited. He's crazy." He made it up. But the video didn't stop. It cut to the next clip. This one was different. It wasn't Jamal or Tiffany. It was Preston. The camera showed Preston sitting on the leather sofa, holding a glass of scotch, looking every inch the master of the universe. He was leaning in, talking to Jamal. "Listen to me, boy," the Preston on the screen said, his voice slurring slightly. "This is how the game is played. My company is underwater. We are bleeding cash. The Miami project is a bust. The banks are calling in the loans." A murmur went through the room. I saw men in suits pulling out their phones, likely checking their investments, checking their exposure to Sterling Heights development. But the video Preston continued, a predatory grin spreading across his face. "If we get the old man to sign the power of attorney, we have access to the lottery lump sum. We dump it into the general fund. We pay off the immediate debts. We pay ourselves a nice management fee. And by the time anyone realizes the money is gone, the company declares bankruptcy, and we walk away clean. The old man takes the fall. He's the investor of record. We're just the advisors." On screen, Jamal nodded. "So he loses everything. He's 75. Preston laughed. "What does he need money for? He needs a bed and some soup. We need to survive." "It's just business, Jamal. Just business." The video cut to black. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating. The air had been sucked out of the room, replaced by the toxicity of the truth. I looked at Preston. He was standing near the stage, his face a mask of horror. His investors, the men he had been toasting moments ago, were staring at him. One of them, a man with silver hair and a look of authority, stepped forward. "Is that true, Preston?" The man asked, his voice low and dangerous. Is the Miami project a bust? Are you using new money to pay off old debts? Preston stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead with a shaking hand. No, it's taken out of context. It's a deep fake. Technology these days, you know. The old man is confused. He's trying to sabotage me, but nobody was looking at Preston anymore. They were looking at the screen. They were looking at the evidence of their own foolishness for trusting these people. And then the energy in the room shifted. It turned dark. I looked toward the bar. The three men in the ill-fitting suits, the loan sharks, were no longer leaning against the counter. They were standing up straight. They weren't looking at the screen. They were looking at Jamal. They didn't care about the morality of putting an old man in a nursing home. They didn't care about Tiffany's cruelty. But they cared about the money. They cared about the fact that Jamal had promised them payment based on a fortune he was trying to steal. They cared that the man who owed them $200,000 was standing on stage admitting he was broke, admitting he had spent the house money, admitting his only plan was fraud. They started to move. They moved like water fluid and inevitable. They cut through the crowd of shocked socialites, their eyes locked on my son. Jamal saw them. He saw the look in their eyes. It wasn't the look of business partners. It was the look of debt collectors who collected in blood. Jamal backed away from the edge of the stage, bumping into me. He turned his eyes wide with terror. "Pops," he whispered, his voice trembling, "what did you do? You ruined it. You ruined everything." I looked at him. I looked at the son who had handed me a $2 ticket and expected me to be grateful. I looked at the son who had planned to erase my existence. "I didn't ruin anything, son," I said into the microphone, letting the whole room hear. I just turned on the lights. I stepped away from the podium. I walked to the edge of the stage. The crowd parted for me, giving me a wide berth, looking at me with a mixture of fear and awe. I wasn't the confused old man anymore. I was the judge, and the verdict had been delivered. But I wasn't done. The video was just the opening act. The video was just the mirror. Now it was time for the hammer. I reached into my inside pocket again. Jamal watched me, hope flickering in his eyes like a dying candle. He thought maybe, just maybe, I was going to pull out the ticket. He thought maybe I was going to save him from the wolves approaching the stage. I pulled out a piece of paper, but it wasn't a lottery ticket. It was a single folded sheet of legal stationery. I unfolded it slowly. "You want the money, Jamal?" I asked. "You want the inheritance?" "Yes," he cried out. "Yes, Pops. Please, they're going to kill me." I held up the paper. "This isn't the ticket," I said. "This is a receipt." "A receipt for the donation I made this morning." "Donation," Tiffany screamed from the floor. "What donation?" "To the Home for the Forgotten," I said. "The state facility you tried to put me in. I visited them today. I saw the conditions. I saw the people there, people like me who had been discarded by their families." I paused. The room was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the buckets. "I didn't cash the ticket for myself," I said. "I signed the rights over to a blind trust. And the trust has a single mandate: to build a new wing, to hire better staff, to make sure no old man or woman ever has to rot in a place like that again." "You gave it away," Preston choked out. "You gave away $148 million. I looked at him. "I invested it, Preston, in something real, in dignity." Then I looked at Jamal. "And as for you, son," I said, "I have one thing left for you." I reached into my pants pocket. I pulled out a quarter, a single shiny coin. I flipped it into the air. It caught the light spinning end over end. It landed on the stage at Jamal's feet with a metallic ping. "Call someone who cares," I said. "Because I don't anymore." I turned my back on him. I walked down the stairs of the stage. The loan sharks were at the bottom. They didn't stop me. They nodded at me, a sign of respect from one predator to another. Then they stepped up onto the stage, surrounding my son. I walked through the crowd. I walked past Tiffany, who was sobbing on the floor. I walked past Preston, who was trying to explain himself to a circle of angry investors. I walked out the double doors of the mansion and into the night. The air was cool. The stars were bright. I took a deep breath. It tasted of freedom. But as I reached the bottom of the driveway, I heard a sound. A scream. It was Jamal. It was the sound of a man realizing that the bill had finally come due and his wallet was empty. I didn't turn around. I kept walking. My work here was done. The party was over. And the devil had come to collect his own. The video screen went black, plunging the ballroom into a sudden heavy twilight. but the afterimage of my son's betrayal was burned into the retinas of every person in the room. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the vacuum before an explosion. I stood at the podium, a 75-year-old man in a suit that smelled of mothballs, looking down at the ruins of my family. Jamal stood center stage, his face a mask of sheer, unadulterated terror. He looked at the sharks by the bar who were now cracking their knuckles. He looked at his wife who was staring at him with the hatred of a woman who realizes she married a pauper in prince's clothing. And then he looked at me. In that split second, the fear in his eyes curdled into a violent, desperate rage. He realized the game was up. He realized there was no talking his way out of this. He couldn't charm the creditors. He couldn't lie to the investors. The only thing left, the only lifeline he thought existed was the physical control of the situation. He had to stop me. He had to silence the old man before I burned the rest of his world to the ground. "You senile old bat!" He screamed, a sound that tore through the sophisticated veneer of the evening like a serrated knife. "You ruined everything!" He lunged. It wasn't the clumsy stumble of a drunk. It was the focused attack of a cornered animal. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his hands reaching for my throat, his eyes wide and white. He was going to hurt me. My own son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders to see the parade, was coming to choke the life out of me on a stage he had paid for with borrowed money. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I didn't have to. From the shadows on either side of the stage, 2 mountains of men materialized. They moved with a speed that defied their size. These weren't venue security. These were professionals. Denzel had hired men who used to bounce at clubs where people brought knives to a fistfight. Before Jamal could even touch the hem of my jacket, a hand the size of a catcher's mitt clamped onto his shoulder. Another hand grabbed his wrist. Jamal's momentum was arrested instantly. He was jerked back his feet, leaving the floor for a second. "Get off me!" he shrieked, thrashing against them. "That's my father!" "He's sick. He doesn't know what he's doing." The guards didn't speak. They didn't blink. They just held him there, suspended like an unruly child 5 feet away from me. He was close enough that I could smell the expensive cologne turning sour with sweat. He was close enough that I could see the veins bulging in his neck. I looked at him. I looked at the crowd. The socialites were gasping, clutching their pearls. The loan sharks were watching with amused detachment like Romans at the Colosseum waiting for the lions. "Let him go," I said into the microphone. My voice was calm, authoritative. The guards looked at me. I nodded. They released him, but they didn't step back. They stood right behind him, a wall of muscle, ensuring he wouldn't try again. Jamal stumbled, straightening his jacket, trying to regain a shred of dignity that had evaporated 10 minutes ago. He looked up at me, his chest heaving. "Pops, please," he panted, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper that the microphone still picked up. "Stop this. Stop the show. We can fix this. Just tell them it's a joke. Tell them you're confused. Please. I'll lose everything." I looked at him with a pity that felt colder than hate. "You already lost everything, son," I said. "You lost it the moment you decided I was disposable." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. Jamal's eyes locked onto my hand. He stopped breathing. The entire room seemed to lean forward. This was it, the moment of truth. I pulled out the ticket. It wasn't the thermal paper receipt I had shown earlier. It was the Powerball ticket, the real one. Or at least it looked exactly like the one I had slept with under my pillow for 3 nights. I held it up. The stage lights caught the glossy paper. "Do you know what this is?" I asked the room. Jamal's knees buckled. He let out a whimper. "It's the ticket," he whispered. "The boot ticket." $148 million, I said, my voice ringing out. "That is what this piece of paper represents. It represents freedom. It represents power. It represents a life of ease that most people only dream of." I looked at the ticket, then at Jamal. "For 20 years I played these numbers," I said. 4, 12, 18, 26, 44. Powerball 10. They are the dates of your mother's birth. The day you graduated. The day I retired. Every number on this paper is a memory of love. A memory of us. Jamal was weeping now, open, ugly tears. "Pops, please. Give it to me. I'll be good. I swear I'll be good." I looked at him. "I was going to give it to you, Jamal," I said softly. "When the numbers hit, my first thought wasn't a yacht, it wasn't a mansion, it was you. I thought, finally I can help him. Finally he won't have to struggle. I was going to give you half, $74 million. A collective gasp went through the room. $74 million. It was a number that could buy nations. But then I continued, my voice hardening. You gave me a gift too. You gave me the truth. You showed me that to you I am not a father. I am livestock. I am an asset to be managed, harvested, and then discarded when I stop producing. No, Jamal cried. No, Pops. That's not true. It is true. I roared, slamming my hand on the podium. The video proves it. Your actions prove it. You tried to erase me, Jamal. You tried to bury me alive in a nursing home so you could steal the harvest. I held the ticket up higher, so now I have a decision to make. What do I do with this? Do I give it to the man who wished me dead? Do I fund the lifestyle of the woman who called me a waste of space? Tiffany was at the foot of the stage now, her makeup running, her hands clasped in prayer. Booker, please. We're sorry. We were stressed. We love you. Think of the baby. Think of your grandson. My grandson, I said, looking at her with ice in my veins. The grandson you wouldn't let me see because you said I smelled like old soup. The grandson whose nursery you used to plot my demise. Don't you dare speak his name. I looked back at the ticket. Money is a tool, I said to the silent room. It can build or it can destroy. And right now, this money is poison. It has poisoned my family. It has turned my son into a monster. I reached into my pants pocket. I pulled out my old Zippo lighter. It was scratched, the silver plating worn away to reveal the brass underneath. It clinked as I flipped the lid open. The sound was small, but in the silence of the ballroom it sounded like a gavel striking a block. Jamal's eyes bulged. He saw the lighter. He saw the ticket. He understood. No, he whispered. Pops. No. Don't. I struck the flint. A yellow flame danced into existence. I looked at the flame. Then I looked at the ticket. If this money is the reason you hate me, I said, then let's get rid of the reason. I moved the flame toward the corner of the ticket. No! Jamal screamed. It was a sound of pure primal agony. He lunged again, fighting the guards with the strength of a madman. No, stop him. He's crazy. That's $148 million. The guards held him back effortlessly. He was thrashing, reaching out his fingers, clawing at the air inches from the stage. I didn't stop. I touched the flame to the paper. It caught instantly. Thermal paper burns fast. A bright orange line of fire raced up the side of the ticket. Smoke curled into the air, black and acrid. I held it up. The crowd watched in horrified fascination. They were witnessing a fortune vanish in real time. Preston had his hands on his head, his mouth opening and closing silently. Tiffany was pulling at her hair, screaming a high, thin sound that didn't stop. But Jamal stopped fighting. He just stared. He watched the numbers turn to ash. 4, gone. 12, gone. 18, gone. The fire reached my fingers. I held it until the heat kissed my skin, until the last scrap of paper turned black and crumbled. Then I opened my hand. Ash fluttered down to the stage floor, a gray dust that settled on the polished wood. $148 million. Gone. I snapped the lighter shut. The flame vanished. It is done, I said. The silence that followed lasted for a heartbeat, 2 heartbeats, and then the sound of a body hitting the floor broke the spell. Jamal didn't stagger. He didn't stumble. He simply ceased to function. His brain, unable to process the magnitude of the loss, shut down. He collapsed backward, his eyes rolling into his head, and hit the floor with a sickening thud. He lay there sprawled out in his rented tuxedo, unconscious at the feet of the loan sharks he had promised to pay. Tiffany let out a wail that sounded like an air raid siren. She fell on top of him, shaking him, slapping his face. Wake up, you idiot. He burned it. He burned it all. We're ruined. We're dead. The room erupted into chaos. The socialites were fleeing, running for the exits, as if the poverty might be contagious. The waiters were freezing, unsure if they would ever get paid. But the 3 men by the bar, the sharks, they didn't run. They didn't panic. They walked calmly toward the stage. They looked at the unconscious man on the floor. They looked at the pile of ash on the stage. One of them looked up at me. He didn't look angry. He looked impressed. He tipped his head in a small nod. I looked back at him. I didn't smile. I just adjusted my cuffs. The ticket was gone. The money was gone, and my son lay broken on the floor. It was the most expensive bonfire in history, and it was worth every penny. because I knew something they didn't. I knew what tomorrow would bring. But for tonight, the lesson was complete. The Devil's Gala had ended in fire. The last wisp of smoke curled up from the pile of ash on the stage floor, a gray ghost dancing in the spotlight. The smell of burnt paper hung heavy in the air, mixing with the scent of expensive perfume and fear. The ballroom was silent, a silence so profound it felt like the world had stopped spinning. 200 guests stood frozen, their eyes locked on the small mound of dust that used to be a fortune. Jamal was still on his knees, staring at the ash. His hands were hovering over it, trembling as if he could somehow reach into the past and pull the ticket back from the fire. He looked up at me, his eyes hollow, his face streaked with tears and snot. He looked like a child who had just watched his favorite toy get crushed by a truck. "You burned it," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You actually burned it. $148 million. You crazy old man. You burned our lives." I looked down at him. I adjusted my cuffs, brushing a speck of ash from my sleeve. "Get up, Jamal," I said. He didn't move. He couldn't. The despair had pinned him to the floor. "I burned a piece of paper, son," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. "That's all." He blinked, confusion clouding his grief. "What?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. I wiped my hands. "That ticket," I said, pointing to the ash. "The one I just burned, it was a fake." A gasp went through the room. It started in the front row and rippled back like a wave. Jamal's head snapped up. "Fake," he choked out. "Yes," I said. "It was a photocopy. A very good one printed on thermal paper I bought at an office supply store. I used a heat lamp to age it. It was a prop, Jamal. Just like this suit you tried to put me in. Just like this party. Just like your love for me. It was all a prop." Jamal scrambled to his feet. He grabbed the podium for support, his legs shaking. Then where is the real one?" he asked, a desperate hope igniting in his eyes. "Do you have it? Is it safe?" I looked at him. I saw the greed rushing back in, filling the void where his soul should have been. He hadn't learned a thing. He thought he had been given a reprieve. He thought the game was still on. "I don't have it," I said. His face fell again. "What then? Who has it?" I looked toward the back of the room. The double doors opened. Denzel walked in. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing his gray suit, the one he wore to court. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand and a stack of papers in the other. He walked through the crowd, his steps measured and heavy. The guests parted for him, sensing the authority radiating from him. He walked up the stairs to the stage. He stood beside me. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at Jamal. "Mr. Washington has it," I said, or rather, he had it. Denzel placed the briefcase on the podium. He opened it. He pulled out a document stamped with the official seal of the Illinois Lottery Commission. "This morning," Denzel said, his voice deep and gravelly, "at 9 a.m. while you were arguing with the caterers. Mr. Coleman and I visited the lottery headquarters. We met with the director. We presented the winning ticket. It was verified, validated, and processed." Jamal let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You claimed it?" "Oh, thank God you claimed it." "It's safe." He turned to the sharks by the bar. "You see?" he shouted, pointing at them. "He claimed it. The money is there. I can pay you. I can pay everyone." He turned back to me, his arms open, ready to embrace the father he had just tried to assault. "Pops, you genius. You scared me to death. But you did it. You saved us. Okay, so the money is in your account. We can transfer it on Monday. I need to wire the $200,000 by noon. And the penthouse deposit." I held up a hand. He stopped. "The money is not in my account," I said. Jamal froze. "Where is it?" I turned to Denzel. He handed me a blue folder. I opened it. "The winnings," I said, reading from the page, "the full lump sum amount after federal and state taxes has been irrevocably transferred." "Transferred?" Jamal asked, his voice trembling. "To who?" "To Preston." Preston stepped forward from the crowd, looking hopeful. "To me." "Did you sign the deal?" I looked at Preston. I laughed. A cold, dry sound. "No, Preston, not to you." I looked at Jamal. I transferred every penny, I said, to the Beatrice Coleman Charitable Trust. The room went silent again. Jamal stared at me. "Beatrice." "Mom, but..." "She's dead. Her name isn't," I said. "The trust was established this morning. Its sole purpose is to fund legal defense for the elderly, to build affordable housing for seniors, and to prosecute cases of familial financial abuse. I closed the folder. $148 million, Jamal. It's gone. It's out of my hands. It's out of your hands. It belongs to the people you tried to step on. Jamal fell back against the podium. No, he whispered. You can't do that. You can't give away my inheritance. That's my money. It was never your money. I roared my anger, finally breaking through the calm facade. It was my money, my luck, my life. And I chose to give it to a cause that matters instead of a son who doesn't. Tiffany screamed from the floor. You monster, you selfish monster, how could you? I looked down at her. She was a mess of running mascara and ruined silk. I'm not a monster, Tiffany, I said. I'm a teacher. And class is in session. I turned back to Jamal. However, I said. Jamal looked up. He latched onto the word. However, I did include a clause for you, I said. Hope. It's a cruel thing. I saw it flare up in his eyes again. A clause. What is it? A stipend. 1 million, 5 million. I opened the folder again. Clause 4. Section B. I read, the trust shall provide a one-time disbursement to Jamal Coleman. Yes, Jamal shouted. How much I looked at him over the top of the paper. Subject to the following conditions, I continued. 1. Jamal Coleman must maintain gainful full-time employment for a period of 5 consecutive years. Jamal's mouth dropped open. Work 2. I read, during this 5-year period, he must live in a residence that costs no more than 30% of his monthly income. 3. He must pay off all existing debts, including personal loans and gambling debts, without any assistance from the trust or any other family member. And 4, I finished closing the folder. He must visit his father once a week, not to ask for money, but to play chess. And if he misses 1 week, the clock resets. I looked at him. If you do all that, Jamal, if you prove you can be a man, then in 5 years the trust will grant you... How much? Jamal asked, breathless. $500,000, I said. 500,000, he screamed. That's it. That's not even enough for the penthouse. It's enough for a house, I said. A real house, like the one you sold. It's enough to start a life, but you have to earn it. He stared at me. He looked at the sharks. He looked at Tiffany. He realized the magnitude of what I had done. I hadn't just cut him off. I had put him in a boot camp. I had given him a ladder, but I had greased the rungs. I can't do that, he wailed. I have debts now. They won't wait 5 years. I know, I said. I stepped back. Denzel stepped forward. Mr. Coleman, Denzel said to Jamal, and Mr. Sterling. Preston looked up startled. Me. Denzel handed a stack of papers to a server who walked them over to Jamal and Preston. You have been served, Denzel said. Served, Preston asked, looking at the thick document. With what civil lawsuit? Denzel said, his voice ringing out. On behalf of Mr. Booker Coleman, we are suing for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and attempted theft by deception. Preston went pale. This is ridiculous. We have the tapes, Denzel said simply. We have the video of you conspiring to misuse his funds. We have the video of Jamal and Tiffany planning to commit him to a facility under false pretenses. And we have the forged credit application Jamal submitted yesterday using Booker's social security number. Jamal looked at the papers in his hand. It wasn't a check. It was an indictment. The police are on their way, Denzel added. Not for the noise, for the fraud. We filed the criminal complaints an hour ago. The room erupted. The socialites bolted for the doors, heels clicking on the marble like hail. They didn't want to be witnesses. They didn't want to be accessories. But the sharks didn't leave. They walked up to the stage. The lead shark, a man with a scar over his eye, looked at Jamal. 5 years, the shark asked. Jamal trembled. I can explain. The shark shook his head. No explanation needed. We don't wait 5 years. He turned to his men. Grab him. Jamal screamed as they grabbed his arms. Not the gentle grip of the security guards. This was the grip of men who broke bones for a living. They dragged him off the stage. Pops, help me, Pops. I stood there. I watched them drag my son through the empty ballroom. I watched Tiffany running after them, screaming, not for her husband, but for her purse, which one of the men had snatched. I looked at Preston. He was sitting on this floor weeping into his hands, the lawsuit scattered around him. I looked at Denzel. "Let's go," Denzel said. We walked down the stairs. I walked past Preston. I stopped for a second. "Nice party, Preston," I said. He didn't look up. We walked out the front door. The cool night air hit my face. I took a deep breath. It smelled of rain and ozone. It smelled of the end of a long, hard shift. The police cars were pulling into the driveway, lights flashing. I saw them putting handcuffs on Preston as we drove away. I saw the ambulance arriving for Jamal, who had apparently fallen down the stairs in the custody of his new friends. I sat in the passenger seat of Denzel's car. I loosened my tie. I felt the weight of the last week lift off my shoulders. I was tired. I was old. But I was free. "Where to?" Denzel asked. "The pier," I said. We drove to the lake. I got out and walked to the edge of the water. The city lights reflected on the black surface. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the thermal receipt for the real ticket, the claim form, the proof of my wealth. I looked at it one last time. Then I tore it into pieces. Small white confetti. I threw them into the wind. They danced over the water before disappearing into the dark. I didn't need the proof. I knew who I was. And now finally, so did they. The ballroom had transformed into an arena of judgment. The air, once filled with the clinking of crystal and the hum of polite conversation, was now thick with the scent of ruin. I stood near the exit, a silent observer to the demolition of the false idols my family had worshipped. Jamal was still on the floor, but he wasn't alone. The three men, the sharks who had watched the presentation with the patience of predators, were now collecting their due. They didn't shout. They didn't make a scene. They operated with a terrifying efficiency that was far more frightening than violence. The leader of the group, the man with the scar, crouched down next to my son. He didn't offer a hand to help him up. Instead, he reached out and unclasped the heavy gold watch from Jamal's wrist. It was a Patek Philippe leased on credit 2 days ago to complete the image of the millionaire. "Interest payment," the man said, sliding the watch into his pocket. Jamal tried to pull away, whimpering like a kicked dog. "Please," he begged. "I can fix this. I have assets. I have the car." The man smiled, a cold stretching of thin lips. "We know you have the car, Jamal. The Ferrari out front, the red one." He held out his hand. "Keys." Jamal hesitated. The Ferrari was his last symbol, his last tether to the fantasy he had built. He clutched his pocket. The man didn't repeat himself. He just nodded to his associate, a mountain of a man in a dark suit. The associate stepped forward and grabbed Jamal by the lapels of his rented tuxedo, lifting him slightly off the floor. He reached into Jamal's pocket and fished out the keys with the prancing horse emblem. "Thank you," the leader said. "That covers the late fees for this week. We'll be in touch about the principal on Monday." And Jamal, if you're not at work at 6 a.m. to start earning that $500,000, we'll come for the rest. He patted Jamal's cheek hard enough to leave a mark and walked away. The crowd parted for them as they headed for the door, the keys jingling in his hand. Jamal slumped back onto the floor, stripped of his time and his ride, a king without a crown, sitting in the wreckage of his own ego. But the night wasn't over. The stage lights were still on, illuminating the next act of the tragedy. Preston Sterling was standing near the buffet table, frantically typing on his phone, trying to salvage the investors who were fleeing the room like rats from a sinking ship. He was sweating through his white dinner jacket, his face a mask of panic. He didn't see the officers coming until they were standing right in front of him. There were 4 of them. Chicago Police Department Financial Crimes Division. They didn't look like they were there for the champagne. Preston Sterling, the lead detective, asked, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the remaining guests. Preston looked up his phone, slipping from his sweaty fingers and clattering onto the floor. "Yes, who are you?" "I'm in the middle of a very important—" "You are under arrest," the detective said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal caught the light, shining brighter than Preston's cufflinks. "Arrest," Preston squeaked. "For what?" "This is a misunderstanding. I am a pillar of this community. I demand to speak to my lawyer." "You can speak to him at the station," the detective said, spinning Preston around and slamming him against the table. A tray of caviar crashed to the floor, black pearls scattering like buckshot. "You are charged with 17 counts of wire fraud, embezzlement, and operating a Ponzi scheme through Sterling Heights Development." The guests who hadn't fled yet gasped. The investors who had been drinking Preston's liquor stared in horror as the man who promised them triple returns was cuffed and read his rights. "It's a lie," Preston screamed, struggling against the cuffs. "It's that old man. He set me up. He's senile. He doesn't know what he's doing." I stepped forward then. I walked slowly toward the buffet table, Denzel right beside me. I looked at Preston, his face pressed against the white tablecloth, caviar smeared on his cheek. "I know exactly what I am doing, Preston," I said softly. Preston twisted his head to look at me, his eyes bulging. You did this. You gave them the files." "I didn't give them anything they didn't already have," I said. "But my lawyer, Mr. Washington, did find it interesting that you were soliciting funds from a senior citizen to pay off federal tax liens. He thought the district attorney might find it interesting too." Denzel nodded. "We sent the courier over this afternoon, Preston, just after you ordered the flowers." "Take him away," the detective barked. They dragged Preston out. He was kicking and screaming, begging Caroline to call the mayor, call the governor, call anyone. Caroline stood there frozen, clutching her fur coat, watching her husband and her lifestyle disappear into the back of a squad car. She didn't move to help him. She looked at me with eyes full of hate, but she didn't say a word. She knew she was next if she opened her mouth. And then there was Tiffany. She was standing in the center of the room alone. Her friends had abandoned her. Her husband was broken on the floor. Her father was in handcuffs. Her mother was catatonic. The dynasty she thought she was marrying into had turned out to be a mirage. She looked around the empty ballroom, her eyes wild. She looked at the debris of the party, the broken glass, the spilled wine, the ruined dreams. Then her eyes landed on Jamal. He was sitting up now, hugging his knees, rocking back and forth. He looked pathetic. She walked over to him. She didn't kneel down to comfort him. She stood over him like an executioner. "I want a divorce," she said. Her voice was cold, flat, devoid of emotion. Jamal looked up. "Tiff, I am done," she spat. "I am not going to be the wife of a pauper. You lied to me. You told me you had money. You told me your father was going to pay for everything. You are a fraud, Jamal. A loser. And I am leaving." She turned to walk away, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. "Not so fast, Mrs. Coleman." It was Denzel. He stepped into her path, blocking her exit. He held a file in his hand. "Move out of my way," she snapped. "I'm calling my lawyer. I'm taking half of whatever he has left, even if it's just the lint in his pockets." "You can certainly call your lawyer," Denzel said calmly. "But you might want to ask him about joint and several liability first." Tiffany stopped. "What are you talking about?" Denzel opened the file. "I have here copies of the loan documents for the Ferrari, and the lease for the penthouse, and the promissory notes for the business loans Jamal took out last month." So she asked. "That's his debt. Look at the signature line," Tiffany, Denzel said, holding the paper up. She looked. Her eyes widened. That looks like my signature. But I didn't sign that, Jamal," she screamed, spinning around. "You forged my signature." Jamal didn't answer. He just looked at the floor. "Actually," Denzel interrupted, "you did sign it. You signed a power of attorney for Jamal 3 years ago when you were buying the first condo. It gave him the right to sign on your behalf for all marital assets and debts." "It was buried in their closing paperwork. You didn't read it, did you?" Tiffany went pale. "No, that's not fair." "It's legal," Denzel said. "And since Jamal has no assets and no income, the creditors will be looking to you. Your jewelry, your bags, your car, even your future wages. You are on the hook, Tiffany, for everything. $200,000 to the private lenders, $50,000 to the venue, the Ferrari lease break fee. It's all yours." She stared at Denzel. She looked at her Birkin bag, the one she had bought with money she didn't have. She realized it wasn't an asset anymore. It was evidence. She let out a scream of pure frustration. She threw the bag at Jamal. It hit him in the chest, spilling lipstick and credit cards all over him. "I hate you," she shrieked. "I hate you all." She ran. She ran out of the ballroom, past the waiters, past the police, out into the night. She was running from a debt she couldn't pay, running from a life that had trapped her. But I knew she couldn't run far. The sharks knew where she lived. I stood there in the silence of the aftermath. The ballroom was almost empty now. Just me, Denzel, and my son. Jamal sat amidst the ruin of his life. The gold watch was gone. The car was gone. His wife was gone. His pride was ash on the floor. He looked up at me. His eyes were red, swollen. He looked like a child again, a child who had broken something he couldn't fix. "Pops," he whispered. "What do I do?" I looked at him. I felt a pang of sorrow, deep and sharp. I wanted to help him. I wanted to write a check. I wanted to fix it like I had fixed his bike, like I had fixed his grades, like I had fixed his life for 35 years. But I knew I couldn't. If I fixed this, I would break him forever. I walked over to him. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the quarter I had flipped earlier. It was lying on the floor near his foot. I picked it up. I handed it to him. "You start over, son," I said. "You start from zero, like I did." He took the quarter. His hand was shaking. "But I can't," he sobbed. "It's too hard." "It's supposed to be hard," I said. "That's how you know it's real." I stood up. I buttoned my old Navy jacket. I looked at Denzel. "Ready?" I asked. "Ready," Denzel said. We walked toward the door. I didn't look back at Jamal. I left him there on the floor of the rented mansion, surrounded by the debris of his greed. I left him to face the silence. I left him to find out if there was a man inside that suit or just more empty space. I walked out of the Vanderbilt estate. The air was crisp. The police lights had faded into the distance. The city was quiet. I had no car. I had no home to go back to since the movers had packed it up. But I had $148 million in a trust that would change the world. And more importantly, I had my name. I was Booker Coleman. And for the first time in a long time, that meant something. I looked at the road ahead. It was dark, but I wasn't afraid. I had walked through the fire and I had come out clean. "Let's go get a burger, Denzel," I said. "I'm starving." Denzel laughed. "On you, on me," I said. "But we're splitting the fries. I'm on a budget." We walked into the night, two old men who had just taken down a kingdom, and behind us the lights of the mansion flickered and went out, leaving my son in the dark to find his own way home. The sun hung low over the horizon, painting the waves of Lake Michigan in shades of burnt orange and deep violet. I sat in the stern of the boat, a 40-foot fishing yacht I had named the Beatrice. It was sleek white and powerful, a machine that cost more than the entire block I used to live on. But I wasn't wearing boat shoes or a captain's hat. I was wearing my old fishing vest, the one with the fraying pockets, and a pair of canvas sneakers that had seen better days. I held a rod in my hands, feeling the gentle tug of the current, listening to the rhythmic slap of water against the hull. It had been 6 months since the fire. 6 months since I stood on a stage and burned a legacy to save a soul. The silence out here was different from the silence in my old house. That silence had been lonely, filled with the echoes of a life that was shrinking. This silence was expansive. It was full of possibility. It was the silence of a man who had nothing left to prove and no one left to fear. I reeled in the line, slowly checking the bait. It was gone. A clever fish had stolen my worm and left me with an empty hook. I chuckled, reaching into the bucket for another. That was the way of things. Sometimes you get the meal, sometimes you get the lesson. Next to me on the teak table that held my iced tea, my phone began to vibrate. It wasn't a ringtone. I kept it on silent. It was just a persistent, angry buzz that rattled the ice in my glass. I didn't look at it immediately. I baited the hook, cast the line back out, and watched the bobber settle on the surface. Only then did I pick up the device. The screen was lit up with notifications. 109 missed calls. 109 desperate attempts to bridge a gap that was wider than the ocean I was floating on. The name on the screen was simply Son. I looked at the number. I imagined him on the other end. I imagined Jamal likely sitting in a small apartment in the suburbs wearing a suit he bought at a discount rack, trying to convince me that he had changed. Trying to convince me that the 5 years shouldn't apply to him. Trying to tell me about the creditors who were still circling about the shame of taking the bus, about the unfairness of having to work for a living. He called again. The phone buzzed in my hand, demanding attention, demanding resources, demanding the father he had tried to erase. I thought about answering. I thought about hearing his voice. But I knew what he would say. He would ask for money. He would ask for a shortcut. He would tell me he loved me, but his love would be conditional, wrapped in the expectation of a wire transfer. I looked at the water. It was deep here, dark and cold. A place where things could disappear and never be found. I didn't answer. I didn't decline the call. I simply extended my arm over the side of the boat. I held the phone there for a second, watching the screen light up one last time with the word, Son. Then I let go. The phone tumbled through the air end over end. It hit the water with a small, insignificant splash. Ripples spread out, then vanished, swallowed by the vastness of the lake. It sank into the darkness, taking the 109 missed calls, the desperate texts, and the toxic tether to my past with it. I sat back in my chair. I took a sip of tea. I felt lighter. The anchor was gone. I wasn't alone out here. Below deck, Denzel was napping, snoring softly, exhausted from a morning of legal briefs and foundation meetings. And back on shore, there were others waiting for me. I reeled in the line and packed up the gear. I steered the Beatrice back toward the harbor, the city skyline rising up to meet me like a jagged crown. But I wasn't going to a penthouse. I wasn't going to a country club. I docked the boat and drove my modest Ford truck to the west side of Chicago, to a neighborhood that looked a lot like the one I had left, but with fresh paint and new hope. I pulled up to a brick building that used to be an abandoned warehouse. Now a sign above the door read, "The Beatrice Coleman Trade Academy." I walked inside. The air smelled of sawdust, welding ozone, and honest sweat. It was the smell of my life, the smell of dignity. The main floor was bustling. Dozens of young men and women kids who had fallen through the cracks of the system were working. They were learning to fix engines, to frame houses, to code computers. They were learning that their hands had value, that their minds were assets, that they could build a future without waiting for a lottery ticket. "Mr. Coleman," a voice shouted. I turned. A young man named Marcus ran over to me, wiping grease from his hands onto a rag. He was 19, with eyes that had seen too much trouble but were now bright with purpose. He was the first student I had personally sponsored. "We got that engine running," Mr. Coleman Marcus said, grinning. "The transmission was shot, but we rebuilt it. It purrs like a kitten now." "Show me," I said. He led me to the bay where an old sedan sat with its hood up. A group of students gathered around, looking at me not with greed but with pride. They didn't want my money, they wanted my approval. They wanted to show me what they had done. I leaned over the engine. I listened to the hum. It was music. "Good work, Marcus," I said, patting him on the shoulder. "Solid work. This car will run for another 100,000 miles. He beamed. "Thanks, Pops. I mean, Mr. Coleman." I smiled. "It's okay, son. You can call me Pops." I looked around the room. I saw the faces of the instructors, retired tradesmen I had hired to pass on their skills. I saw the faces of the students' kids who had been told they were trash, just like my ticket. This was my legacy, not a trust fund for a spoiled man who hated me, but a chance for 100 kids who just needed a door to open. I spent the afternoon there showing a girl how to properly sand a cabinet door, helping a boy troubleshoot a circuit board. I laughed. I told stories about the docks. I listened to their dreams. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a burden. I felt like a resource. I felt like a father. That evening, I drove back to my new house. It wasn't a mansion. It was a sturdy brick bungalow with a garden in the back where I grew tomatoes and peppers. It was small, manageable, and mine. I sat on the porch as the sun went down. I thought about Jamal. I wondered if he was still calling the number that was now at the bottom of Lake Michigan. I wondered if he had started his 5-year clock yet. I hoped he had. I hoped that one day, 5 years from now, he would walk up this driveway with calloused hands and a clean soul. I hoped he would come to play chess, not to beg. But if he didn't, I would be okay. I had found the truth hidden in the numbers. 4, 12, 18, 26, 44, Powerball 10. They weren't just lucky numbers. They were milestones. They were the map of a life lived with grit and love. I looked at the empty chair next to me. I imagined Beatrice sitting there, her hand in mine. "We did good, Bea," I whispered to the twilight. "We did good." I closed my eyes and listened to the sounds of the neighborhood. Children playing, a lawnmower in the distance, the hum of the city. I was Booker Coleman. I was worth $148 million. But as I sat there in the quiet of my own home, rich with the respect of strangers who had become family, I knew the truth. I was priceless. True wealth isn't measured by the balance in your bank account, but by the integrity of your soul. I spent a lifetime building a foundation of love for my son, only to watch him trade it for the illusion of status. Money amplifies who you truly are. It turned my son into a monster, and me into a stranger. To all the children who view their parents as stepping stones, remember the hand that fed you can also cut you off. Dignity is the one currency you cannot counterfeit, and once lost, no lottery jackpot can buy it back. They say money changes people, but I believe money simply reveals who they always were. My son saw my lottery win as his salvation, a shortcut to a life he hadn't earned, while I saw it as a tool to build something lasting for those who truly needed it. I learned that the poorest man isn't the one without a penny, but the one without character. To every parent watching, do not handicap your children by making their lives too easy. The greatest gift you can give them isn't a trust fund, but the struggle that forges their soul. Sometimes you have to let them fall so they can learn how to stand. If this story of justice and tough love resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more. And tell me in the comments, do you think I was too hard on Jamal, or did he get exactly the lesson he needed?